Dawn over Marineford. First light bleeding over stone and steel. The sun crawls up behind towers of justice, painting the execution platform in gold. Warships sleep in neat formation, their cannons still, their flags already awake. Picture this. Above them all, a single massive banner snaps in the morning wind. The familiar seagull of the Marines spreads its wings wide, but today it does not fly alone. Behind it, a ring of rays circles like a rising sun, a halo etched into white and blue, not the quiet symbol of simple order, but a blazing mark of worship to something larger than men. Not a world chasing freedom, but a world kneeling before a single righteous dawn. In this alternate timeline, the sun itself has been drafted into service, pressed into the uniform of justice. Marines march along the causeways as the light spills over their coats. The word justice stretches across their backs, and just beneath the lettering, a stylized sun flares out like a brand. This is a world where the Straw Hat crew never hoists a Jolly Roger, never paints a laughing skull under a wide-brimmed hat. Instead, their journey begins under this very banner, wrapped in white coats, sworn to the world government and its shining emblem of control. His straw hat still exists here, its shadow still cutting across his eyes. His dreams are still too big for any cage. But the sun that once seemed to call him toward adventure now stares down from every flagpole, watching, measuring, demanding obedience. What happens when the very symbol of liberation is stitched into the uniform of those who claim absolute justice? Because you remember what the sun means in the world you know. The burning mark of Fisher Tiger's sun pirates, covering the hoof of slavery with a promise of new identity. The whispered tales of Nika, the sun god who dances and laughs, bringing joy and freedom to the oppressed. The dawn of the world that Fishman Island waits for. The rising light the world government fears so much it buries entire centuries. In that cannon sea, the sun is rebellion. Here it is a logo. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario where the same glowing circle that crowns the Revolutionary Army's flag, the same radiance hinted in the Kozuki Crest once the snakes fall away, is polished, framed and weaponized as propaganda. In this alternate timeline, posters across the blues show a radiant sun above the words, "Only one justice." Children are taught that the light belongs to the Marines alone. Freedom is rebranded as safety. Laughter is permitted, as long as it salutes first. Does that change what the sun really stands for? Yet even under this blinding dawn, shadows move in hushed corridors beneath Mariéjois. Scholars vanish for asking why the poneglyphs speak of a coming daybreak. On distant islands, old sailors still murmur the name Joy Boy, like a half-forgotten sunrise. The world government hangs suns on every wall, but flinches at the word dawn. What secret are they trying to eclipse? Back at Marineford, the sun finally clears the horizon. A single figure stands at the edge of a high balcony, white coat billowing, straw hat tilted. The word justice blazes across his back, a bright sun sigil burning just beneath it like a second brand. He grins, that same impossible grin that once promised the greatest freedom on the sea. Is the light behind Monkey D. Luffy now a symbol of control, a weapon of the Marines, or something far older than justice and freedom both, waiting to break through this uniformed dawn. That light behind him is where we come in. Not as another pirate flag, but as a scalpel. A scalpel aimed straight at the brightest symbol in One Piece. Welcome to Anime Autopsy, where we dissect symbols, timelines, and what-if worlds inside anime until the hidden organs of the story are exposed on the table. Picture this. Instead of just watching Luffy punch a celestial dragon, you're peeling back the panels, tracing every sun, crest, and tattoo like a forensic pathologist of fiction. That's the kind of justice we practice here. Narrative justice. And since we're cutting this story open anyway, let's talk numbers. Most of you who keep washing up on these videos, rewinding scenes and arguing in the comments about freedom versus authority, still aren't officially part of the crew. Only a small percentage of regular viewers are actually subscribed. In this alternate timeline, that's like sailing with the Marines, wearing the coat, following the orders, but never swearing in with the other story surgeons who catch the deep lore others miss. Why watch from the shore when you can be on deck for every operation? So here's what happens when you commit to the full journey today. This video is going to map every major sun motif in One Piece. Fisher Tiger's burning tattoo covering the Celestial Dragon brand, the Sun Pirate's Jolly Roger, Luffy's Gear 5 Nika halo, even Wano's hidden Kozuki Crest once the 8 snakes are stripped away, onto a world where the Straw Hats serve the Marines first and rebel later. Not a random collage of cool panels, but a guided adventure through how that same symbol mutates under the uniform. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario as more than fan fiction. This isn't just theory dumping, it's a structured thought experiment. In this alternate timeline, every sun we track becomes a lens to understand why Oda keeps hiding them in flags, names, and prophecies. What does it mean when the emblem that once freed slaves under Fisher Tiger now burns on the back of a Marine captain who might ignite the dawn of the world? What happens when the light of Nika, the god of liberation, is forced to march in step with the world government's idea of justice? If you want to see how the Will of D, the Void Sentry, and the Coming Dawn might all orbit this same blinding symbol, now is the time to lock in. Like the video, subscribe, and double check your notification settings so you don't miss the follow-ups where we connect every piece of this solar puzzle into a bigger cosmic picture. The autopsy has only just begun. So let us take a look at this what-if scenario from a different angle. You've seen the sun as rebellion, as prophecy, as the coming dawn the world government fears. But what happens when that same blazing symbol is no longer outlawed and instead becomes the official emblem of marine justice? Picture this, not a slave ship stormed by Fisher Tiger under a banner of defiant suns, but a pristine marine fortress at late afternoon, the sky bleeding orange. Not a Jolly Roger of freedom, but a regulation flag, a stylized sun radiating over the world government's sigil. The same shape, a completely different promise. What if the mark that once covered the Celestial Dragon's hoof brand now hangs proudly over the very institutions that created those brands in the first place? In this alternate timeline, the sun is not whispered about as Nika's legend or hidden in the Kozuki Crest. It is rebranded as state myth, the light of lawful order. Children are taught that the rising sun on marine bases represents safety, not revolution. The Revolutionary Army's own rising sun flag is dismissed as a stolen, twisted copy. Official history claims that any talk of a dawn of the world is just propaganda spread by criminals and traitors. Now drop the Straw Hat crew into that system. Luffy still wears his hat. His smile is still wide. His strength still feels like a miracle when his mysterious fruit awakens. But instead of a pirate captain, he's a prodigy marine captain, trained under Garp, celebrated as the son of hope for the people, and paraded through newspapers as the living embodiment of world government justice. His dream of ultimate freedom has to move through paperwork, chains of command, and a sun that tells him his duty is to obey. Zoro is there as the swordsman who finally found structure. Not a bounty hunter wandering for jewels, but an enlisted officer whose blades are sanctioned by marine law. His journey to become the world's strongest still drives him. Yet every time his coat flares and that sun insignia flashes, he has to ask himself, whose justice is his strength really serving? Nami's talents for navigation and understanding of the seas are now weaponized by the institution. She charts world maps for marine fleets, not pirate adventures, tracking trade routes, taxation lines, and strategic choke points under that radiant emblem. The rest of the crew follow suit as elite soldiers of the world government. Sanji cooking for admirals, Usopp crafting weapons, Chopper running marine hospitals, Robin buried in classified poneglyph reports, Frankie engineering sun-powered warships, Brook playing anthems that praise the light of order. Their dreams are still there, but every one of them has to pass through the filter of marine justice and solar propaganda. And because of that, canon events twist. When Fisher Tiger rises, he's not just facing faceless officers. He's facing a marine unit that carries the sun on their backs. A Sun Pirate's legacy, Fishman Island's prophecy of a dawn, The Revolutionary Army's rising sun flag, all of it collides with Luffy's own unit, officially branded as the Shining Vanguard. Are they protectors of peace or guardians of the Age of Darkness? From here, we're going to move character by character. As each Straw Hat either obeys, bends, or tries to reclaim that symbol, you'll start to see what the sun truly means in One Piece's world building. When the moment comes that one of them finally refuses to wear that emblem, everything you thought you knew about the coming dawn will start to crack. But before we let the Marines twist the meaning of the sun, you need to know what it really looks like in canon. Not as propaganda, but as a living symbol of freedom and pain. Picture this: the deck of the Sun Pirate's ship, that blazing Jolly Roger painted across the sail, not a skull of terror, but a sun that Fisher Tiger carved into the world with his own rage. Every former slave who joins him takes that same shape onto their skin, a circle of light that swallows the celestial dragon's hoof. The brand that once screamed ownership becomes a declaration, I belong to no one. Isn't that the purest act of rebellion you can imagine? Jinbe carries that sun on his chest like armor. Aladdin, Arlong, nameless fishmen and humans alike bear it as a second birthmark. Under that emblem, their journey is not about treasure, but about clawing back dignity from a world government that literally branded them as less than human. The sun here is not gentle. It's scar tissue turned into a banner. Then far above that bloody history, you reach Luffy's Gear 5, white hair, drums of liberation pounding like a heartbeat. His body bends like a cartoon, but the aura around him, it's radiant, almost solar, spilling out in waves that light up even the darkest battlefield. The manga does not whisper about this. It shouts. Nika, the sun god, a legend of joy, liberation, and people dancing under the sun when their chains finally fall away. What happens when the boy who always chased adventure becomes the literal embodiment of that myth? Let us take a look at this what-if scenario by grounding it in those quieter suns too. The Revolutionary Army's flag rises with a red sun cresting the horizon, their justice framed as a new morning breaking over tyranny. The Kozuki clan of Wano carry a crest that looks like 8 snakes around a circle. Remove the snakes and a hidden sun is revealed. The very family that carved the poneglyphs is secretly orbiting that same image. Even in the manga's panels, tiny suns hang in the sky at turning points, when hope returns to a starving island, when a new age seems ready to begin. Coincidence or design? Listen to the language that wraps around these images. The dawn of the world, the end of an age of darkness. Odin, Roger, Rayleigh all talk about a coming morning they will never see, a sunrise reserved for the next generation's strength and dreams. The sun is not just a light source. It's a promise with a ticking clock. In this alternate timeline, that promise becomes contested territory. The Marines talk of light and justice, of being the beacon in the dark seas. They claim dawn as their slogan. But underneath, the older meaning of the sun, Joy Boy, Nika, true freedom, keeps leaking through in rebellions, in flags, in whispered stories the world government cannot fully erase. When our AU Marines start to notice that every symbol they wear has a shadow, they'll have to ask, whose sunrise are we really fighting for? Because once a Marine starts questioning the sun on their own back, the next step is questioning the orders that keep that dawn from ever arriving. But when a Marine starts questioning the sun on their back, the world government answers by painting a bigger one. Picture this: every major port in the East Blue at dawn, empty plazas, damp stone. Then, slowly, posters go up, Marine recruitment sheets with a blazing golden disc erupting behind the white seagull emblem, rays stretching across the page like they're cleansing the horizon itself. Not a pirate skull, but a bird of order. Not a wild sunrise, but a branded one. In this alternate timeline, the slogan underneath is always the same flavour: bringing light to the dark seas. Stand for the justice of the dawn. You can almost hear the pitch. Join the Marines. Become the sun that burns away chaos. The symbol that once whispered freedom now sells careers, pensions, and standardized heroism. What happens when the light you're promised is actually a spotlight turned outward for propaganda and inward for surveillance? Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from the classroom side. In Marine academies, children memorize charts of flags and crests. The sun behind the seagull is labeled benevolent radiance, proof that the world government watches over every island. History lessons repeat that the true dawn came 800 years ago when the founders ended an age of darkness. Any mention of Nika is reduced to a dangerous superstition. Joy Boy becomes a vague pirate fairy tale. The original Sun Pirates are framed as extremists who mistook anarchy for freedom. Fisher Tiger's sun, especially, cannot be allowed to shine in its original colour. Official textbooks call his emblem a symbol of terror, a mark worn by criminals who attacked innocent nobles. The story ends with a neat line. Their false sun was purified when the Marines restored order, but in secret briefings, Cypher Pole agents use different language. They call that same sun contagious because it lets slaves and former Fishman Island captives cover the celestial dragon hoof with something proud. A brand of shame turned into a badge of strength. That is the kind of light the world government truly fears. And beneath the posters and speeches, the contradiction is everywhere. The celestial dragons still float above the clouds in Marie-Joie, literally closer to the sun than anyone else, yet terrified of the dawn of the world the poneglyphs hint at. Fishman Island remains under a manufactured sky, its people living under a ceiling instead of a sunrise, told to be grateful for protection while their home stays in permanent twilight. Even Wano's hidden Kozuki Crest, once you strip away the snakes, reveals a secret sun that doesn't match the one on Marine banners at all. So can the Marines really own the sun, when its oldest stories belong to slaves covering brands, rebels raising new flags, and a laughing god of freedom dancing in Gear 5 white? In this alternate timeline, that question lands hardest on one man in uniform, Monkey D. Luffy, a Marine captain whose very heartbeat echoes Nika wearing the seagull while his soul remembers another sun entirely. Luffy wears the seagull on his coat, but the sun in his smile. Picture this. Early morning over Dawn Island, mist on the training grounds, Garp's fists falling like meteors while a scrawny kid in a white recruit jacket refuses to stay down. Not a boy dreaming of being Pirate King, but a boy staring past the barracks wondering if freedom can exist inside a fortress. In this alternate timeline, Garp succeeds. He drags Luffy into Marine training, into drills, into discipline. Yet Shanks still visits that tiny harbour bar, still loses his arm, still leaves the straw hat behind. The promise just twists. Not I'll become Pirate King, but I'll become the freest man in the Marines. What happens when that dream collides with a uniform built on orders, ranks, and the world government's version of justice? Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from the moment Luffy bites into a strange purple fruit stolen from a Cypher Pole transport. The records call it the Gomu Gomu no Mi, a special paramecia with unusual resilience, and, in a dark archive under Marie-Joie, an old scroll whispers about a sun god who laughed as he broke chains, a figure the five elders would rather erase than confirm. So they quietly register the fruit, tag Luffy's file, and issue strict observation orders. A harmless rubber boy on paper, a potential Nika in reality. Under Garp's brutal guidance, Luffy's strength explodes. Short missions at first, small pirate crews, bandits terrorizing villages, but his arrival never feels like standard Marine protocol. His punches stretch across plazas, his laughter booms over cannon fire, and every victory looks suspiciously like a festival. The civilians pour into the streets, music erupts, kids copy his goofy poses. Even beaten pirates find themselves laughing as they hit the ground, their shackles coming off before the paperwork is even signed. Is this justice, or something older than the Marines entirely? His superiors call him unpredictable. His crew calls him captain, but Luffy calls it simple: protect people, ignore nonsense. When ordered to burn a pirate fishing village that once traded with sun pirates, he instead shares meals with them and punches the corrupt tax officer who forged their charges. When told to escort a world noble slave convoy, he accidentally breaks every collar on board. Not blind obedience, but instinctive liberation. His white coat says Marine, yet his actions echo the original sun symbol the world government fears, the dawn that frees, not the spotlight that polices. And then, one mission changes everything. Noon over a blazing desert island, the sun directly overhead, the sand almost white. Luffy stands on the deck, steam and strange white vapor curling from his body as his rubber form bends reality just a bit too far. Proto Gear 5 grinning wider than any regulation allows. Below, an illegal slave market hides under marine protection. Above, a Den Mushi crackles with a simple order. Hold position, await authorization, do not engage. The drums in his chest start to beat faster, so when the sun god inside a marine captain is told to stand down in the face of chains, which command will he obey? The order to stand down hangs in the air like smoke. The sun is high, hot, merciless, and somewhere between that blinding light and the shadow of the world government's command structure, Zoro opens his one good eye. Picture this. In this alternate timeline, Roronoa Zoro is not a starving swordsman tied to a post by Axe-Hand Morgan. He's already a marine-affiliated bounty hunter. A blade the institution points at problems it doesn't want to publicly acknowledge. Not a criminal chained in a yard, but a weapon stored in a locked room. Until one mission goes too far. The target is a pirate crew backed by corrupt officers. Zoro cuts them down anyway. He exposes the payoff ledgers, ignores the whispered warnings, and when those officers draw on him to protect their status, he doesn't hesitate. The aftermath is simple. 3 wounded officers, 1 shattered chain of command, and Zoro himself thrown in irons for assaulting Marines and obstructing justice. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario. Instead of Morgan's petty cruelty, Zoro faces a formal tribunal. Dawn. The execution yard is quiet. The rising sun turns his 3 swords into thin lines of fire on the ground beside him. That's when Luffy walks in, coat half-buttoned, cap crooked, eyes bright like he's already decided the verdict. What happens when the sun god in uniform meets the blade that refused to bend? Luffy offers him a choice: die as a criminal or enlist under his direct command. Not under the corrupt officers Zoro cut down, but under a captain who talks about protecting people with a grin too wide for marine protocol. Zoro looks at the emblem on the flag, then at the sun behind Luffy's head. He kneels, not to the Marines, but to the man casting that shadow. Even before this, his dreams were tied to the light. As a child, Zoro trained at dawn, always facing the rising sun with his blades. Not for glory, not for rank, but because that first light was honest. No paperwork, no doctrine, just the raw measure of his strength against the coming day. His vow to become the world's greatest swordsman is forged there, long before he ever learns the word justice. On Luffy's crew, he becomes the right hand of the sun in a blue coat. He enforces discipline, drills the unit, barks at green recruits to stand straight and follow orders. Yet when Luffy quietly disobeys a command to leave slaves in chains or civilians undefended, Zoro is the one who turns his back at just the right moment, not breaking marine rules, but choosing which rules matter. He doesn't care about Nika, or prophecies, or the dawn of the world whispered in ancient texts. Gods don't interest him. But standing next to Luffy in Gear 5, even in regulation whites, feels like standing in direct sunlight, blinding, warm, and impossible to ignore. You can almost see the future conflict already, can't you? Because that same sun burns on marine flags and on the marks that once covered Fisher Tiger's brand. One day, Zoro's sword will have to answer a final question. Does he defend the marine sun emblem, or cut it down so a truer dawn can rise, the dawn carried by revolutionaries whose banner also shows a rising sun? When that moment comes, which light will his blade face? That question doesn't hang in the air for long, because the camera of this alternate timeline swings from Zoro's blade to a different kind of instrument, a pen scratching across parchment under a dim, flickering lamp. Picture this. Late night over Kokoyasu village. No moon, no patrol ships in sight. In canon, Along's shadow falls because the Marines ignore a backwater island. Here, it's worse. A Marine operation is botched. The local base withdraws to regroup, and the vacuum they leave becomes Arlong's invitation. Not absence of justice, but justice misfired so badly it becomes a weapon. Nami watches Arlong's flag rise, while a Marine report calls the situation contained. That single word brands her deeper than any tattoo. So when the same organization later recruits her as a prodigy navigator, what happens when every promotion ceremony feels like standing under the sun that once turned away? Let's take a look at this what-if scenario from her desk aboard a pristine Marine warship. Official charts spread before her. Neat lines of trade routes, Marine bases marked like tiny sons of justice scattered across the blues. Safe zones drawn in confident ink. On paper, the world government looks orderly, protected, rational. But in her private logbook, hidden beneath false bottoms and weather reports, a second map grows. On that secret map, the symbols change. Those same routes are traced again, this time with thin red lines marking slave transports. Fishman ghettos are circled where the official charts show low-priority harbours. Islands under perpetual cloud cover are annotated with quiet fury, heavy taxation, pirate cleansing, no recorded sunrise in 3 months. Which map is the real one? Nami's dream of mapping the whole world doesn't vanish in Marine White. It mutates. In this alternate timeline, she becomes obsessed with climate patterns, studying where the wind refuses to shift and where storms seem almost engineered. She notices how regions crushed by the world government's policies are often the same ones that rarely see the sun, both literally and metaphorically. A village under a Buster Cool's ash cloud. A slum built in the permanent shadow of a holy land. Freedom, she realizes, can be measured in daylight. Then there's Luffy. His laughter cuts through briefing rooms like a sunbeam through fog. At first, she files him away as pure Marine propaganda made flesh. Bright, loud, unbothered by reports she can't unsee. Isn't that what they want? A smiling symbol of justice charging ahead without reading the margins. But mission after mission, something doesn't add up. He breaks orders to save nameless civilians. He shields fishmen from abuse by their own supposed protectors. His sun doesn't sit on a flag. It smashes through clouds. It feels closer to the whispers she's read about Nika, the sun god of liberation, than to any admiral's speech. So Nami starts drawing 2 world maps in earnest. One that matches Marine archives. The world as it is, segmented, controlled, lit only where it's useful. And another that almost no one sees, the world as it should be when the true dawn arrives, when every island gets its sunrise. The crew thinks she's just updating charts for their next adventure. They don't realise she's quietly sketching the battlefield for a future where their own uniforms might become targets. Because when the sky finally breaks and every hidden sun in this story rises at once, on flags, on tattoos, in Luffy's very heartbeat, whose map will the world follow? Picture this. Dawn over Marineford. The first light catching, not pirate flags, but rows of crisp white coats drying on the line. Not one that sails for freedom, but one that now represents the authority of the Marines. Somewhere beneath that same sun, another kind of cartographer is already at work. Not with maps like Nami, but with words. His name is Usopp. In this alternate timeline, Usopp doesn't run from the recruitment poster. He runs toward it. He joins the Marines to impress Kaya and the kids in Syrup Village, swearing he'll become a famous hero of justice, whose name is shouted under every sunrise across the seas. He paints them pictures with his voice. Him on the deck, coat billowing, the world government saluting his strength. You can almost hear the children asking, wide-eyed, will your stories really reach every island? And Usopp, heart-pounding, lies, of course. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from inside the barracks. Late night. Lanterns low. Boots and rifles stacked by the door. Usopp sits cross-legged on a bunk, a tiny audience of exhausted recruits around him. That's where the real adventure begins. He tells them about a sun god who dances on the waves and frees slaves with a smile, a god whose laughter sounds like drums, a god who brings the dawn of the world. Officially, it's nonsense. The instructors scoff. The records say nothing. The world government has buried Joy Boy, Nika, and the Sun Pirates under centuries of censorship. But the lower-ranked soldiers, they listen. They pass the tale from ship to ship. What happens when a lie spreads faster than a classified report? Here's the irony. Usopp thinks he's making it all up. He doesn't realize that his invented stories echo Fisher Tiger's sun tattoo, the Fishman Island prophecies, and whispers about a coming dawn that will end the age of darkness. The details slip out of him like inherited will, like cultural memory bleeding through the cracks of his fear. How does a boy who grew up in a quiet village know to describe a smiling figure whose silhouette looks suspiciously like Nika's against a blazing sun? Under the marine sun emblem, Usopp often feels like a fraud. His knees shake in real battles. His aim wavers when the enemy isn't a sea king from his imagination, but a crying civilian caught between orders and justice. Yet when he sees officers abusing their power, shaking down islanders, silencing witnesses, something in him snaps. He steps in. He lies about secret commands, about higher orders, about classified protocols that protect the weak. And in doing so, he accidentally lives up to the very sun hero he's been mythologizing. Over time, his barracks bedtime stories evolve. They're no longer just about the sun god. They're about the dawn of the world, about Marines who lay down their rifles when justice turns into oppression. Those lies become a quiet rallying cry for deserter Marines in oppressed islands who have heard the legend through the grapevine. A rumour of a coming sunrise, carried in the mouth of a coward who keeps acting brave. But when the first Marine ship defects under a Jolly Roger painted with a rising sun instead of a seagull, whose words do you think they quote? And when that rumour finally reaches a rubber-bodied captain with a drum beat in his chest, what will Usopp's stories awaken next? Picture this. A grey Marine supply ship cutting through a black pre-dawn sea, its decks stacked with crates marked not with seagulls, but with the emblem of a blazing blue sun. In this alternate timeline, that symbol doesn't belong to pirates yet. It belongs to a cook in uniform who refuses to let the world starve quietly. Sanji's journey still begins on that rock with Zeph, waves smashing, stomachs empty, hope thinner than the bread they share. Zeph still gives him his leg, Zeph still gives him his dream, but when rescue finally comes, it isn't a free-floating restaurant that appears on the horizon. It's a marine vessel, not one that sails for freedom, but one that now represents the authority of the Marines, offering a deal, protection, supplies, and a license to operate in exchange for cooperation. So the Bharati is born as a marine-friendly harbour, a place that feeds officers first and everyone else second. Sanji grows up watching Zeph smile at captains while quietly counting how many villagers in the corner can't afford a full plate. What happens when a boy who worships abundance is raised in a system built on controlled scarcity? His answer is simple. Get inside the system and steal the keys. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario, where Sanji joins Luffy's crew as the official marine chef, not just for the prestige, but for access. Access to the Grand Line routes, access to classified charts, access to the whispers of a legend called All Blue. In his mind, All Blue isn't just a sea, it's a map of justice. A place where every fish from every ocean coexists, like every race under one sun. Because Sanji understands something most Marines never think about. Food is captured sunlight. Crops drink it. Fish swim in currents warmed by it. Entire ecosystems rise and fall with its rhythm. If the sun gives freely, why does the world government ration its light? Why do islands under Celestial Dragon influence receive overflowing rations, while others are told a single crate must last a month? On one mission, Sanji unloads sacks of grain onto a pristine Holy Land port, watching nobles complain the bread is a little too dry. 2 weeks later, he stands on a wind-scoured island where children chew on boiled roots and call it dinner. The manifests tell the story clearly. Same budget, different distribution. The sun of justice beams on Maria-Joie. Everywhere else gets twilight. That's where his gentleman's code sharpens into rebellion. He refuses to let civilians starve, no matter what the paperwork says. He miscounts crates. He mislabels luxury goods as medical necessities. He diverts marine resources mid-route because a storm wiped out a harvest and, really, who's going to argue with a chef who cooks for the officers? Isn't it funny how often compassion gets written off as a logistical error? To women begging for food, he bows like a knight, promising they'll eat that night even if he has to go hungry. To hungry kids, he jokes about his ridiculous eyebrows while slipping them extra portions. His strength isn't just in his kicks. It's in his refusal to make hunger a weapon. One dawn after another successful mission that left a rebel sympathetic island on minimal rations, Sanji stands alone at the rail of the marine ship. Below, the town is waking up to another day of not enough. Above, the first light spills over the horizon, painting the waves gold. If the sun can reach them, he mutters, lighting a cigarette with hands that still smell like soup and gunpowder, then so can the all blue. He isn't just dreaming of a sea where all fish meet anymore. He's dreaming of a world where warmth and food and freedom aren't privileges. In that moment, the blue sun on his supply crates feels like a lie. So he makes a quiet vow. One day, he'll stop feeding the world government's shadow and start feeding the coming dawn instead. When that happens, marine logistics won't just lose a chef. They'll lose the man who turned their own sunlight against them. If Sanji is the man who feeds the dawn, then Chopper is the one who tries to make sure it survives until morning. Picture this. A white-blanketed drum island, not sealed off by a mad king, but quietly occupied by a modest marine outpost. Not a kingdom that rejects help, but a fortress that rations it. In this alternate timeline, Chopper grows up watching marine doctors patch up officers in heated barracks while 6 civilians freeze in the snow outside. Same medicine, different justice. You see the contrast immediately. The red cross on the marine tents promises care, yet triage is written by rank, not need. A wounded lieutenant gets 3 surgeons. A dying child gets a clipboard and a weight. What happens when a reindeer, who only ever wanted to help, starts associating white coats with cold decisions? His journey into medicine begins in awe of their strength and knowledge, but every turned-away villager chips at his faith in institutional healing. Then Hiruluk enters his life like a sunrise, that refuses to check the schedule. Not a licensed doctor, but a madman with a dream. Not official treatment, but reckless, desperate hope. When those cherry blossom cannons finally fire, the pink snow drifting over Drum isn't just pretty scenery. It's a false dawn, a man-made sunrise exploding across a sky that never knew spring. In that moment, Chopper learns something the world government would hate. Miracles don't have to wait for permission. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from another angle. A visiting marine medical team arrives to study Drum's unique climate, and one doctor notices the strange little Zoan assisting Hiruluk's experiments. Instead of being hunted, Chopper is recruited. His monster point isn't a curse, it's a rare asset. They bring him into the Marine Medical Corps, where syringes are lined up like rifles and charts march in neat formation. And that's where he meets Luffy's unit. Luffy, who laughs with him, not at him. Nami, who slips him extra cocoa when he overworks. Zoro, who trusts him with his scars. That first shared meal in the mess hall feels to Chopper like stepping out of a blizzard and straight into sunlight. For the first time, the warmth he associates with Hiruluk isn't an accident, it's a crew. But the deeper he goes, the darker the labs become. Behind locked doors, marine science isn't about healing, it's about control. Bioweapon projects that try to turn devil fruits into programmable plagues. Whispered research orders tying medical data to ancient weapons and even to the Void Century. Chopper is told that understanding how different bodies react to light could help the world government stabilize fishmen, minks, even giants. Stabilize or suppress. So he pushes back, quietly at first. He redirects studies toward how sunlight boosts recovery in fishmen used to the deep, how mink physiology responds to moon and day cycles, how human bodies thrive when given warmth and freedom instead of fear. Isn't that a different kind of strength? His reports start slipping in language about resilience, shared biology, a possible reason the ancient kingdom might have revered the sun as more than a symbol. Here's the pattern interrupt. Chopper's the one who may accidentally decode why the Revolutionary Army flies a rising sun and why the Kozuki Crest hides a blazing circle under its snakes. In this alternate timeline, his research becomes a medical roadmap to the final dawn itself. If the world government ever realizes that the smallest doctor in their ranks is quietly proving that all races are built to stand under the same sun, what happens then? Because when the last night falls, the rebellion won't just need fighters. It will need someone who understands how to keep every kind of body alive long enough to see the sky finally change colour. If Chopper's quiet medicine is a roadmap to the final dawn, then Robin is the one reading the legend carved beneath it. Not with stethoscopes or scalpels, but with eyes that have stared at forbidden stone since childhood. Picture this. Instead of a tiny girl vanishing into the underworld as a wanted criminal, she disappears into something colder. A white room, a metal table, a marine coat over a chair that doesn't belong to her. In this alternate timeline, the Buster call on O'Hara still falls, the books still burn, and the tree of knowledge still collapses under the weight of manufactured justice. But Robin doesn't escape on a smuggler's ship. She is pulled from the wreckage, tagged as an asset, and quietly delivered to a secret marine intelligence unit that answers directly to the highest branches of the world government. Not one that hunts pirates in the open, but one that hunts history in the dark. Her journey as a child doesn't lead to a bounty poster. It leads to a basement full of poneglyph fragments, chained scholars, and officers who speak softly while their pens sign death warrants. They tell her she is special. They tell her her strength is her mind. They tell her that if she helps them, the chaos of the past will never return. The first time she sees it, it's almost a mistake. A shattered poneglyph segment, pushed to the side like broken furniture. A circle with radiating lines. A sun carved deep enough that even centuries of erosion couldn't erase its defiance. Around it, in the language only she can read, names repeat. Joy Boy, a sun kingdom. References to a promised dawn that will end the current age of darkness. How many times can one symbol appear before it stops being coincidence and starts being a warning? What happens when the people who fear that dawn control the only person who can read its prophecy? The Marines weaponize her. Missions are built around her translations. She's flown to remote islands, escorted by masked cipher pole agents, ordered to only read what is relevant to security. Relevant, of course, means anything that helps them locate and erase the last traces of that sun-worshipping kingdom. Every time she hesitates, they remind her, the Void Century was chaos, the Sun Cult was dangerous, the world government brought peace. Years later, when she's assigned to observe a rising marine unit led by a rubber-bodied captain, Robin expects another blunt instrument of authority. Instead, she steps onto Luffy's ship and feels something impossible. Warmth. Not from the weather. From him. His laugh. His refusal to bow to titles. His instinctive trust in her, even when every report brands her as a tool, not a person. Under the guidance of Garp, his justice should feel cold. Yet standing near him is like standing near one of those carved suns. Before the chisel ever touched stone. She watches him fight, sees the way his presence lifts civilians, the way fear melts into joy around him, the way his very body seems to bend the world toward freedom. And a terrible, beautiful thought takes root. What if the sun she has chased through dead languages is not just a symbol, but a living will that keeps reincarnating until the world is ready to dawn? So Robin makes her choice. Outwardly, she remains the obedient analyst, handing sanitized translations to her marine handlers. Inwardly, she begins a second archive. Hidden notebooks, altered field reports, secret copies of every mention of Joy Boy, of Nika-like figures, of a sun that refuses to set. She becomes a quiet traitor, not to the Marines she serves beside, but to the censorship that owns them. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from one more angle. A world government that believes it has buried the sun, unaware that the girl cataloguing its ruins is also mapping its return. Because when the final orders come down, and Luffy's crew has to choose between authority and adventure, whose secret history of the dawn will decide which side of the horizon they stand on. And more importantly, what happens when the living sun finally reads what she's been hiding. Picture this. Deep under a blazing noon sky, not in some ancient ruin, but in a cluttered scrapyard on Water 7, another child of the sun is taking notes, not with ink and paper like Robin, but with blueprints, bolts, and burning metal. While she quietly maps the past, Frankie is unknowingly drafting the future of who gets to own the light itself. In this alternate timeline, his journey with Tom still begins with the sea train, but the tracks run in a very different direction. The project isn't a hopeful bridge for a shipwright's dream. It's a militarized artery, funded aggressively by the Marines to connect key bases, to move Buster Call fleets faster, to let the world government drag its version of justice across the oceans in record time. Not a train for adventure, but a weaponized rail for control. Tom still smiles. Tom still teaches, but every new Marine contract feels heavier than steel. When the inevitable framing comes, Tom's execution is branded as righteous punishment for aiding criminal technology. The same judges who rode his sea train call it justice. You can imagine what that does to a boy who worshipped ships. Frankie doesn't just lose a mentor, he loses any illusion that Marine strength is neutral. From that wreckage, his obsession with energy becomes his rebellion. Cola, steam, combustion, he tears through them all, hunting for something purer. What happens when he looks up from a half-finished engine and realizes the biggest power source in the world has been staring down at him the whole time? Sunlight that hits every ocean. Sunlight no Marine can tax. He starts building crude solar panels, reflective sails, heat concentrators that could in theory push a ship without a drop of fuel. Of course, the world government notices. They always notice when someone touches the sun. Higher-ups approach him with polite smiles and iron demands. Design solar cannons that focus light into burning lances. Surveillance arrays that use heat signatures and shadows to track pirate ships from the sky. Not a sun of freedom, but a sun turned into an all-seeing eye. This is where Luffy and Fisher Tiger's legend collide with Frankie's bolts and beams. Stories of the Sun Pirates, of slaves who burned their hoof marks beneath a new emblem, reach even Water 7. Under Luffy's reckless, radiant command, Frankie starts to twist his designs. The same solar grids that could power cannons become barrier shields that flare to life when shells fall. The same lenses that could scorch holes instead amplify light for underground farms on starving islands. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from a different angle. A future battle where every sketch he's ever drawn is on the line. The Marines want a final weapon, a colossal orbital mirror that can erase a rebel island in one blinding stroke. Frankie stands at the control core, hands hovering over levers that could either concentrate that light into annihilation or redirect it into a dawn project flooding the island with endless power, breaking the occupation overnight. In that instant, technology stops being neutral. It becomes a verdict. Will the sun stay a symbol of Marine judgment, or will Frankie, engineer of solar justice, rewrite its purpose in one impossible gamble? And if he chooses the dawn, what new shadow will the world government cast to smother it next? Dawn again. Not over Eni's lobby's burning courts, not over a weaponized sun cannon, but over a quiet stretch of Grand Line Sea where the light feels almost apologetic. Picture this. A single Marine ship drifting in that pale gold, and on its deck, a tall skeleton in a tattered suit draws his bow across a violin, as if he's trying to tune the sunrise itself. In this alternate timeline, Brook's journey into the Marines doesn't begin with a whale's promise echoing into piracy, but with a tragedy stamped, classified by the world government. The Rumbar pirates, are not taken by random disease. They are erased by a marine operation gone wrong. A Buster Call test that miscalculates, turning a routine crackdown into a massacre. Survivors? Officially there are none. Unofficially, one soul crawls back from death. Brook dies with his crew and wakes alone in the dark. His revived body a cruel joke under a sky with no dawn. When he finally learns the truth, that a marine flag flew over the ships that doomed his friends. What happens when the only vessel strong enough to cross the world and find Laboon belonged to that same institution? He joins the Marines not out of faith in justice, not loyalty, but leverage. On paper, he is an oddity in uniform, a gentleman skeleton, rank-and-file musician. In practice, he becomes something far more dangerous. The sound of mourning inside a system built on fear. His most powerful performances happen at first light. On frozen decks in the calm belt, in shattered harbours the night after a raid. As the sun edges over the horizon, he plays songs about a coming morning, about lost promises, about a sun that will reunite separated friends across impossible distances. The Marines notice. Of course they do. Morale rises where Brook plays. Civilians stop trembling. Young recruits stand straighter. So bases start staging his concerts with the great seagull and sun marine emblem looming behind him, framing his silhouette like an official seal. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario. Music as a weapon, not of gunpowder, but of mood. Brook is deployed like artillery, his concert scheduled before high-risk missions, his image used on posters that whisper, but listen closely to the lyrics. Between the sanctioned verses about order and safety, he smuggles in quiet heresies, freedom as a birthright, a dawn that belongs to everyone, not just those under a particular flag, a laughing sun that dances over slaves and nobles alike. Who exactly is that, if not a shadow of Nika bleeding into a marine hymn? Brook's undead body turns sunrise into philosophy. As someone who has literally died and returned, every morning feels like a small resurrection. Each dawn is proof that endings can be delayed, that stories can restart. His strength is not in fists or cannons, but in this stubborn belief, if the world can wake up after nights like his, then maybe the world itself is waiting to be reborn. Pattern interrupt. Imagine a restricted archive room instead of a concert hall. No cheering crew. Just Brook, a contraband poneglyph rubbing hidden in his coat, and rumours of a sun god the world government has tried to erase. In this alternate timeline, the skeleton who once sang Binks's Sake for a single whale begins composing something no marine hymn book will ever approve. A forbidden song that names Nika directly, that speaks of the dawn of the world as a promise, not a threat. He writes it at sunrise. Melody curls around the first rays like smoke. A tune built to be remembered even when words are banned. You can almost hear it echoing forward, can't you? Into future uprisings, into whispered arrangements, into the background of revolutions that haven't happened yet. What happens when a song spreads faster than any wanted poster? When a skeleton in marine white plants the idea that the true sun is rising, and it will not stop at the edge of marine jurisdiction, Brook plays the first full version alone, on deck, facing the sun, coat fluttering around bones that should not move and yet refuse to rest. Somewhere far away, a whale feels something in the water and sings back. Somewhere even further, a rubber boy destined for Gear 5 laughs in his sleep. The Marines think they've gained a mascot of order, a charming undead curiosity. Instead, they've handed a wandering bard the perfect stage to broadcast the world's most dangerous lullaby. Because in this alternate timeline, the dawn doesn't just arrive on battlefields or in laboratories. It slips in through melodies, through the cracks in official anthems, through a violin that refuses to play only what it's told. And as Brook's forbidden hymn to Nika quietly migrates from base to base, from mess hall to mess hall, you have to wonder, when the final dawn comes, will anyone remember where they first heard its tune? Picture this. The humming mess halls fall silent. Brook's forbidden melody about a laughing sun god still echoing in the rafters, And somewhere far below, under 10,000 meters of crushing water, another man stares at a very different sun. Not one painted in song, but one carved into his own skin. In this alternate timeline, Jinbei's journey still begins the same way. Under Fisher Tiger's banner, aboard the Sun Pirate's ship, with a flag that turned the brand of slavery into a blazing promise of freedom. He fights alongside Tiger when they raid Mariejo. He watches former slaves press ink over the celestial dragon hoof, transforming shame into a sun. But when Tiger dies, the world government's anger does not just fall on pirates. It turns, like a tidal wave, toward Fishman Island itself. What happens when the man who swore to follow Tiger's dream is told that his people will pay the price for that dream? The Marines arrive with offers that sound like threats wrapped in paperwork. Protection for the island, reduced patrols, and fewer inspection raids. All in exchange for one thing: Jinbei's strength and his cooperation as a commissioned officer. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario where Jinbei says yes. He accepts a conditional Marine commission, not out of belief in their justice, but out of fear of what their justice looks like without him. He becomes a liaison, the tame sun pirate who can walk both decks, the coral streets of Fishman Island and the polished halls of Marine bases. Over his broad chest, the same sun tattoo from Cannon burns bright, still covering the slave brand. But now he wears a white Marine coat draped over it, the word justice stamped across fabric that hides the symbol of his true allegiance. Freedom beneath, state power above. Which one defines him when he faces the mirror? Every time Jinbei feels that coat settle on his shoulders, he remembers Fisher Tiger raising the sun flag and refusing to bow to the world government's laws. Yet he also remembers Queen Otahime's pleas, the prophecy whispered in the currents, a promised dawn of the world, and a figure who will lead fishmen to live openly under the real sun. Can that guiding light really wear a Marine uniform? Or is he helping to snuff it out before it rises? Then he meets Luffy, not as a reckless pirate captain, but as a Marine whose smile feels like heresy. Jinbei sees in Luffy the same warmth, the same impossible defiance Tiger had when he tore off slave chains and painted suns over scars. Luffy talks about protecting anyone he wants, about bending orders if they crush innocent people, about using his rank as a tool, not a cage. Is this boy the bridge between Tiger's rebellion and a new kind of justice, or just another idealist destined to be broken by the system? As Jinbei watches Luffy's crew move through the ranks, their dreams refusing to shrink to fit Marine doctrine, the tension inside him tightens. He knows the prophecy, knows the world government fears the dawn, and he knows that one day he will have to choose: keep negotiating under a false sun stitched onto his coat, or cast it off and help Luffy reclaim the original meaning of that blazing symbol in open, unforgivable defiance. When that moment finally comes, whose sun will Jinbei stand beneath? Picture this: the red line at midnight, not as a border on a map, but as a wall of stone cutting the world in half, lit only by a thin smear of moonlight. A lone figure climbs, fingers bleeding, shackles long gone but still heavy in his memory. That is Fisher Tiger in canon, turning an impossible cliff into a declaration. No gate the world government builds can cage every dream forever. He doesn't climb for glory, he climbs to break into Mary Jewess, shatter the chains of humans and fishmen alike, and tear open the Holy Land the celestial dragons call untouchable. Out of that night raid, out of that chaos of keys, tears, and terrified former slaves, comes a new flag on the seas. Not one that sails for freedom, but one that now represents the authority of the Marines. In this alternate timeline, that sun tattoo is still born from pain. Former slaves press ink into scarred flesh not to hide the past, but to rewrite it. The circle and rays don't function as a simple logo. They are a brand inverted, a scar turned into a banner. It's their way of saying, under a sun that shines on everyone equally, we belong to ourselves now. You can feel the weight in every panel where someone trembles as the needle hits their skin, can't you? But what happens when the story of that climb is no longer told by survivors and is instead archived by the Marines? Let us take a look at this what-if scenario. In official reports, Fisher Tiger becomes a dangerous extremist, a terrorist who weaponized the sun to incite rebellion. His assault on Merijiways is framed not as liberation, but as an unforgivable attack on sacred authority, a justification for harsher justice across the seas. Under new directives, Fishman Island is treated like a powder keg. Marine patrols increase, trade routes are monitored, and the sun itself is regulated. Public sun tattoos are flagged as potential signs of sedition. Tailors are questioned. Tattoo artists are watched. The symbol that once promised open skies is now pushed into the shadows. Surviving sun pirates are forced into brutal compromises. Some, like Jinbei, accept marine commissions, wearing coats stitched with the world government's crest, while hiding their original sun beneath layers of cloth. Others vanish underground, turning the tattoo into a secret mark of resistance, shown only in locked rooms and dark coves. The same sun that once flew proudly on a Jolly Roger now glows like an ember under bandages and sleeves. And here is the real tension for this world. If the original sun was born in chains and rebellion, what happens when that emblem is stamped onto marine banners and officer coats? Does it dilute the meaning Fisher Tiger died for, or does that quiet, stubborn circle start to corrupt the institution from within? When Luffy's crew finally stands beneath that borrowed light, will they see a badge of authority, or the faint outline of a promise the Marines were never meant to keep? Picture this, not the blazing sun crest stitched onto a pirate sail, but a pale imitation hung from steel and sea stone. Deep below the surface, under 10,000 meters of pressure, Fishman Island still dreams of dawn. But in this alternate timeline, that dream has been confiscated, catalogued, and placed under Marine supervision. Canon gives you the blueprint. A kingdom trapped in the deep sea, a people chained by racism, scarred by the celestial dragon's brand, clinging to Fisher Tiger's sun as a mark of stolen freedom. Their legends speak of a figure from the surface who will guide them to the dawn of the world, a day when fishmen and humans stand under the same sky. Not a quick fix, but a long, painful journey toward real justice. In this alternate timeline, the world government claims it has already delivered that dawn. A colossal artificial sun lamp hangs over the coral city, suspended from the red line like a mechanical halo. Its light is warm, its glow constant, its presence inescapable. Officials call it a gift, a symbol of protection. But everyone down there knows the truth. That metal sphere is not a path to freedom, just a spotlight in a cage. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from the ground. Every plaza is lined with marine watchtowers. Shells record conversations. Patrols glide through the water like shadows. Posters plaster the walls. The sun of justice protects Fishman Island. The emblem shows radiant beams shining down from a stylized marine seagull, as if the very concept of light now belongs to the admirals. What happens when the same institution that once branded fishmen as property now claims to be their guiding star? Pattern interrupt comes in the quiet glances. Old fishmen trace faded sun tattoos hidden beneath uniforms of wise. Children look up at the lamp and ask, if that's the sun, why can't we go see the sky? The red line looms above like a ceiling of stone and law, reminding them that both the real sun and political freedom are still blocked by the same towering structure. Jinbei stands right at the fault line of this contradiction. Once the helmsman of Fisher Tiger's dream, he is now a decorated officer, the official liaison of the Straw Hat Marine Unit to Fishman Island. His strength keeps pirates at bay. His reputation calms the streets, and his orders are clear. Maintain order, suppress extremist sun symbolism, and make sure no one turns Fisher Tiger's mark into a rallying flag again. But the remnants of the sun pirates have not forgotten. Young radicals sketch rising suns over the marine posters. Secret gatherings whisper about the true dawn, not the fluorescent lie humming above their heads. Luffy's crew, bound by duty yet driven by their own dreams of adventure and justice, find themselves chasing these symbols, tearing down flags that look uncomfortably like the promise they're supposed to uphold. And somewhere in the future of this story, when Luffy's Nika powers finally erupt into full impossible daylight, Fishman Island will become a battlefield of meanings. The artificial marine sun will flicker, the ancient promise of dawn will roar, and under 10,000 meters of water, everyone will be forced to decide which light they believe in. Down in that drowned battlefield of meanings, the light doesn't just clash. It divides, it judges. It asks every soul, which sun do you stand under? Picture this. Far above Fishman Island, in banners whipped by high-altitude winds, another sun rises. Not the blazing Nika halo, not the artificial marine globe, but the emblem of the Revolutionary Army. A red horizon with a sun just breaching it, rays like blades cutting through the darkness of the world government. In this alternate timeline, that flag is whispered about like a storm omen. Wherever it appears, kingdoms topple, treaties burn, and the promise of a different justice takes shape. Canon already tells you their intent. The Revolutionary Army lives to topple the world government itself, not just pirates or corrupt nobles. Monkey D. Dragon, the most wanted man in the world, is the one who chose that rising sun as his banner. Not a calm moon sky, not marine daylight, a moment of transition, a world caught between night and something new. But power never lets a symbol stay pure. In this alternate timeline, marine propaganda brands Dragon's forces with a devastating title, Children of the False Sun. Official broadcasts insist that the revolutionaries only want chaos. They're accused of promising a fake dawn that will plunge the seas into endless war. Isn't it ironic? The organization whose very flag is a rising sun is framed as the enemy of true light, while the Marines claim to be the only daylight humanity can trust. Every single week, let us take a look at this what-if scenario through the family at the center of it. Garp, Dragon, Luffy, 3 generations, 3 sons. Garp is bound to marine daylight, the clean, orderly light of official justice, even as he sees its shadows. Dragon walks beneath the revolutionary sunrise, willing to burn the old world to reach a freer horizon. And Luffy? His strength is tied to Nika's primordial sun of joy, a light that laughs at both systems and refuses to be owned. What happens when a single family carries 3 different answers to the same question? What is justice? The revolutionaries don't stay quiet under marine slander. Their artists circulate secret broadsheets across ports and slums. The marine sun emblem drawn cracked and broken, its surface peeling away like flaking paint. Beneath it, an older, more radiant sun is revealed, its rays longer, more ancient, echoing the erased kingdom tied to the poneglyphs. To the faithful, it's a reminder that marine daylight is just a cover, that the world government sits between the world and its true dawn. And somewhere in the middle of all this, a single coat becomes a ticking time bomb. The Straw Hat Marine unit marches under the seagull and sun, but the boy wearing that coat carries a different light in his chest. You can already feel the collision being set up, right? When Luffy's crew is finally ordered to intercept Dragon's forces, he won't just be choosing between parent and grandparent. He'll be forced to decide between the sun stitched on his back and the sun laughing in his heartbeat. When that moment comes, which one will he betray, and which one will betray him first? Picture this. Far below the calm surface of Fishman Island, in a cavern lit by artificial light, an apology echoes across centuries. Not a battle cry, not a declaration of justice, but a single sorrowful promise from a man named Joy Boy, a man the world government has tried to erase. In this alternate timeline, that echo is louder because the Marines you've been following are standing right on top of the lie. Canon gives you just fragments, a poneglyph carrying Joy Boy's apology to the fishmen. The Void Century, wiped so clean that even its name is forbidden, hints that there was once an advanced kingdom, strong enough to oppose the 20 nations that would become the world government, and idealistic enough to be destroyed for it. And let us take a look at this what-if scenario and push those fragments one step further. What if that kingdom was a sun kingdom, not a kingdom of weapons, but of warmth. A civilization that didn't just worship the sun as a god, but used it as a shared language of freedom, prosperity, and technological strength. Their cities might have been ringed with solar towers, their ships guided by sun-marked sails, their crests hiding radiant circles the way the Kozuki Crest hides its sun once the snakes are peeled away. In this alternate timeline, scholars inside the Marines whisper that the dawn of the world was not poetic at all. It was the age when that sun kingdom lit up every sea. Now connect that to Nika, the sun god of liberation, a laughing figure whose very silhouette looks like a dancing sun, whose legend promises chains breaking and slaves smiling. What happens when you realize Nika could have been the hero of that kingdom, or the title given to whoever bore its will? Boy Roger Luffy. Three men separated by centuries, but all drawn to that same radiant idea of freedom. Joy Boy fails Fishman Island. Roger arrives too early. Becomes a bouncing, blazing sun in human form, turning battlefields into playgrounds. In this AU, the world government's fear of that symbol is sharper, more bureaucratic, more chilling. Deep in Marine HQ, buried under layers of clearance, sits a classified directive, Project Eclipse. Not one operation, but a centuries-long strategy. Outlaw the study of the void century. Brand the sun on the backs of slaves, then force them to cover it with a new mark. Replace the Sun Pirate's emblem with the seagull of justice. Rewrite Nika as a fairy tale, while quietly monopolizing every acceptable image of radiance and order. But you can't own the sky. The more the Marines try to weaponize the sun, stamping it on flags, medals, propaganda posters, the more hollow their light feels. That's why understanding this buried Sun Kingdom matters for this story. It explains why Project Eclipse is doomed from the start, and why Luffy's Nika form is the ultimate pattern interrupt. A sun they cannot brand, cannot censor, cannot command. When that living dawn finally rises inside a Marine uniform, whose justice will the world believe? The painted sunrise of the world government, or the laughing impossible daylight of one man's freedom? And when the crew has to choose between those two suns, which horizon will they sail toward next? Picture this: no clouds, no shadows. Just Marineford at absolute high noon, the sun pinned directly overhead like an unblinking eye as the world government prepares its grand display of justice. Not a quiet execution in the dark, but a blinding spectacle in the clearest light possible, as if they want the entire world to see their version of order and mistake it for the sun itself. In this alternate timeline, the platform is the same, the tension is the same, but the prisoner is different. Ace still kneels in chains, the son of the Pirate King branded as the ultimate threat to order. Yet below him, lined up in crisp uniforms, stands the Straw Hat Marine unit. Luffy's crew now part of the shield instead of the spear, his straw hat still perched firmly on his head, though now it carries a different meaning. Not a pirate's promise of freedom, but a Marine's oath colliding with a brother's love. What happens when those two meanings cannot coexist? When the sun above refuses to blink, every contradiction on that plaza becomes impossible to ignore. Whitebeard's first quake shatters the bay, and under that relentless daylight you can see everything. The terrified civilians in the distance, the trembling recruits, the admirals who speak of justice while standing on a scaffold built for public death. Akanu's magma erupts like a man-made sun, but next to the real thing, it looks smaller, angrier, almost desperate. Old Kiji's ice spreads across the sea, glittering so brightly it hurts to look at, a frozen mirror reflecting the battlefield's hypocrisy back at the Marines who created it. Under this sky, there is no comforting darkness to hide behind slogans. Every body that falls, every order barked from the high platform, every plea Luffy hears from Ace cuts sharper because the sun is exposing not just blood but intent. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario, where even light itself feels judgmental. And the pattern finally breaks. Luffy moves to protect a condemned pirate when his orders demand he hold the line, and something inside him snaps like a drawn bowstring. His heartbeat stutters, then pounds, then sings. Joy, terror, and defiance collide, and the air around him warps. The plaza ripples. Stone stretches. Cannons bend. For a moment, Marineford looks like the world has been sketched in rubber. Under that laughing, impossible pressure, the sun seems to distort, its rays wobbling as if they're part of the joke. Luffy's Nika power surges, turning the battlefield into an elastic, cartoonish nightmare where cannonballs bounce back toward their own batteries and Whitebeard's quakes roll like exaggerated waves from a child's drawing. Admirals stare, pirates gape. You, watching this, can almost hear the world government's propaganda crack. Is this justice, they wonder, or blasphemy? A god of freedom awakening inside a marine uniform, making the very symbol of order wobble like rubber. As Luffy stands between the scaffold and the pirates below, his smile wide, his body glowing with that living dawn, he has a choice. Stretch his power to shield the symbol of marine order behind him, or twist the very plaza to protect the criminals in front of him. And high above, the sun does not look away. For whose decision will that ancient light seem to bless? The uniform, or the chains he's about to break? Luffy's choice at Logtown hangs in the air like heat shimmer, and from there, the story shifts. Not to a pirate island bathed in moonlight, but to a judicial fortress drowned in daylight. Picture this. Eni's lobby, the island where the sun never sets, not because of nature, but because the world government refuses to let darkness, doubt, or questions exist. In canon, you remember this place as the stage of open defiance, a courthouse under perpetual noon that claims its justice is always visible. No shadows, no secrets. In this alternate timeline, that same blinding sky becomes marine territory for the Straw Hat unit, now wearing uniforms instead of Jolly Rogers. They arrive not as invaders, but as escorts, guarding a single prisoner whose very existence threatens the story the sun above is supposed to guarantee. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario. The chains rattle, the sea train hisses, and in the center car sits Nico Robin, or perhaps another archaeologist who followed the poneglyph trail too far. Someone who knows that the dawn of the world and a sun god named Nika once burned across history. Their crime is not violence. Their crime is memory. What happens when the brightest island in the world becomes the place where knowledge is sentenced to death? The Marines around Luffy call Eni's lobby a symbol of perfect order. The flag snaps, the white stone glows, the sun hangs high, unmoving, but that light feels wrong. It is not sunrise promising adventure. It is not sunset, inviting reflection. It is a frozen noon, an oppressive glare that never allows the crew or the world to rest or change. If dawn is freedom, this is surveillance. At first, the Straw Hat Marines try to believe. Zoro walks those endless bridges, telling himself strength in service of law is still honourable. Nami studies the currents around the waterfall, quietly noting how every route in or out is controlled. Sanji serves pristine meals to judges who never see a nighttime sky, listening as they talk casually about Buster Call. You can feel it, can't you? Justice here is not about people. It's about preserving the light source. Then the cracks start. Luffy hears of trials held with no defendants present, verdicts signed before hearings begin. Nami discovers records of islands erased, their names scorched out under the same symbol that crowns Eni's lobby's courthouse. A Buster Call, they're told, is cleansing fire. But you already know the truth. Cleansing for whom? Pattern interrupt. Imagine the archives beneath that glowing plaza. Rooms with no windows, where historians are disappeared. Where mentions of Joy Boy, the Void Century, and the Dawn are redacted line by line. The higher the sun blazes above, the deeper the darkness below. Isn't that the real architecture of this world government? In this alternate timeline, the moment of fracture comes on the courthouse roof. The Straw Hat Marines stand together, uniforms torn, the high sun burning at their backs instead of in their eyes. Below them, the prisoner who knows the sun's true meaning waits on the bridge of hesitation. Above them, the world government flag flaps, a claim that even the sky belongs to their justice. Luffy looks at that flag, then at his crew, then at the light stretching their shadows forward. Are they extensions of this system, or something new casting its own silhouette? His straw hat still perched firmly on his head, though now it carries a different meaning. He reaches up. Will he salute the emblem that owns the artificial day, or order his marines to burn it and side with the coming dawn? As the wind rises and fingers curl around rifle stocks and sword hilts, the sun does not move, but everything else does. The decision they make here will decide whether Eni's lobby remains a monument to frozen noon or becomes the first crack through which the real morning can finally shine. Picture this. The crack they chose at Eni's lobby doesn't seal the dam. It only makes the pressure worse. Not in the open sun of a judicial island, but under the artificial glare of Sabaodi's auction house, that tension finally explodes. In canon, Sabaodi is already a nightmare. A golden hall where humans and fishmen are paraded like rare animals. Celestial dragons bidding behind glass. Their guns and marine escorts turning every breath into permission. A brand of the Tenryubito, that hoof-shaped scar, burns on backs and chests as a reminder that the world government doesn't just rule seas, it owns bodies. This is the very system Fisher Tiger bled to defy, the very cruelty that forged the Sun Pirates and their promise of freedom under a new emblem. In this alternate timeline, you don't walk into Sabaodi as a pirate crew looking for a coating. You march in as a marine unit assigned to maintain order. Luffy's straw hat still perched firmly on his head, though now it carries a different meaning. Not the mark of a rogue adventurer, but the cap of a decorated officer leading disciplined steps down the red carpet. Their orders are simple and sickening. Protect the celestial dragons, secure the auction, and ensure that no slave escapes the hoof of their justice. The room is almost theatrical. Short, spotlight, long shadow. A single harsh beam pins each trembling body on the stage while the rest of the hall drowns in darkness. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario. Marines in pristine white, swords at their sides, standing as the wall that keeps the chains from breaking. What happens when the sun on their uniforms is the same colour as the light that exposes every scar? Then, one man steps onto the platform, a fishman with broad shoulders, in like the deep sea, and on his chest, over a faintly visible hoof brand, a black sun tattoo. Jinbei freezes, his pupils shrink. That mark isn't decoration, it's history. It's Fisher Tiger's rebellion, the Sun Pirates' refusal to let the hoof define them. In the dark, more shapes glimmer. Circles with rays, crude but defiant. Inked over burned flesh. Robin watches from the ranks, eyes half-lidded but mind racing. She's seen this symbol in stone, hidden in poneglyph patterns, in the altered crest of the Kozuki clan where snakes once coiled around a concealed sun. Here it isn't prophecy, it's survival. How many times can the world government try to bury the same star before it rises anyway? And Luffy doesn't have the words. He just has the feeling, a pressure in his chest that doesn't care about rank or protocol. His training screams, stand still, obey, protect the nobles. But every time a bidder laughs, every time a slave flinches from that spotlight, something older than his marine oath growls awake. Why does the emblem on his coat suddenly feel like a lie? The pattern shatters when a celestial dragon raises his pistol toward a kneeling girl whose sun tattoo is still fresh, ink bleeding around an unhealed brand. The hall holds its breath. The spotlight traps her. The darkness swallows everyone else. And then, impossibly, a shaft of real sunlight knifes through a crack in the auction house ceiling, catching the dust, turning the stage gold for a heartbeat. It falls across Luffy's face as he steps forward, not as Captain Luffy of the Marines, but as the boy who cannot watch chains tighten. His fist moves before the orders do, before the rifles can level, echoing that legendary punch from cannon. But this time, the uniform on his back makes it treason. The celestial dragon's mask shatters under his knuckles. The spotlight swings wild. Slaves and nobles alike are thrown into chaos as that single ray of sun widens, as if the building itself can't decide which light to obey. In that instant, the sun stops being a stamped insignia of marine authority for Luffy. It stops being the controlled, artificial day the world government sells as order. It reverts to what Fisher Tiger made it, what Nika once embodied, what the poneglyphs whisper about, a promise to break chains no matter who forged them. From this moment on, every mission, every order, every justice he's handed will be measured against that flash of sunlight on the auction stage. Is he serving the sun that brands or the sun that burns brands away? As the chaos of Sabaody erupts around them, the crew doesn't know it yet, but this is the true beginning of their journey away from the institution and toward the dawn it fears most. The flash of sunlight on Sabaody's auction stage becomes a question that follows the crew all the way to the land that tried to shut the sky out. Night over Wano, low clouds. A country lit not by stars but by paper lanterns and guarded borders. Wano in canon is isolated by choice. In this alternate timeline, it's isolated by occupation. Not one tyrant, but two. Kaido's skull dome burns on the horizon, while marine warships ring the natural walls like iron barnacles, their flags snapping in the wind. Not a land closed for tradition, but a land pinned shut by competing justice. Picture this. You're looking at a Wano port that shouldn't exist, a legal harbour carved out by a world government treaty with Orochi. Marine banners hang over the gate, the familiar seagull encircled by a stylized ring that almost looks like a halo, almost like a sun. That emblem is supposed to promise order, safety, but every time the camera pulls back, that ring symbol feels like a lid on a pot about to boil over. Deep inside the country, far from those flags, the Kozuki Crest waits in the dark. At first glance, it's tangled with 8 curling snakes, a knot of lines that looks more like a warning than a welcome. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario. Robin, now a marine turned reluctant rebel scholar, and Nami, the strategist who has learned to read maps and power in the same glance, kneel before an old engraving in Odin's hidden chamber. Robin brushes away dust, Nami traces the snakes. When they imagine the 8 serpents peeled back, the underlying shape appears, a perfect radiating circle, a sun. The same clan that carved the poneglyphs once carried a dawn on their backs, long before the Marines ever flew their ringed seagull. What happens when you realize the symbol of justice you served might be a borrowed light, or worse, a stolen one? Robin quietly notes the timeline. The Kozuki Crest predates the world government. It predates the Marines. In this alternate timeline, that means something dangerous. The sun motif the government now wraps around its own emblem might be a deliberate echo of the very civilization it erased. Did they copy the sun to claim it, or ring it to cage it? For Nami, who once believed the Marines could buy her island's freedom with contracts and taxes, that realization hits like a storm. The world government didn't invent the dawn, it only branded it. And then there's Odin. His dream of opening Wano's borders isn't just about ships and trade routes. It's about tearing the roof off a country so the real sun can touch it again. Not the artificial glow of marine protection, not the hellish orange of Kaido's flames, but the same light Joy Boy once promised. Odin's execution in this version plays differently when you see it. A man boiled beneath a sky he's trying to give back to his people. In this alternate timeline, every time Luffy looks up at Wano's choked sky, his Nika-infused heartbeat answers that buried crest. His very existence asks, whose son will this land recognize? The one on the flags of the blockade, the one hidden beneath coiled snakes, or the one laughing in his chest? If the final battle over Onigashima looms, you can almost storyboard the clash. Marine flags whipping in the storm winds, Kaido's dragonfire painting the clouds bloody red, the Kozuki symbol revealed on banners raised by rebels, and then Luffy, Gear 5 igniting the sky into blinding white, his body sketching a giant grinning sun over Wano. Freedom versus control, a herited will versus institutional branding. The morning itself becomes contested territory, and somewhere on a marine deck, an officer stares up at that impossible sky and realizes the ring around their seagull suddenly looks less like a halo and more like handcuffs. But if Wano is where the suns collide, where did this war over daylight truly begin? And how far back does the world government's fear of the dawn actually go? Picture this. Midday over Dressrosa. No clouds, no shadows, just blinding lights spilling over red roofs and marble plazas. Tourists cheer, gladiators fight, flowers bloom on every balcony. On the surface, it looks like the very poster child of marine justice winning. In canon, you know the truth hiding under that postcard. Doflamingo strings tug at everything. Toys wandering the streets, families missing pieces of their memories, an entire population edited like a corrupted file. The brighter the colours, the blacker the secrets. Not a kingdom of joy, but a stage of puppets. In this alternate timeline, that stage is officially endorsed. The Marines don't just tolerate Dressrosa. They stand beside Doflamingo at the balcony, medals gleaming in the same sun that bathes the Colosseum. Under the guidance of Garp, the Straw Hat Marines arrive as honoured guests, not outlaws. His grandson's crew marches through sunlit plazas, greeted by parades, music and smiling citizens. Luffy, Zoro, Nami and Sanji look up at that clear sky and think, isn't this what we trained for? A nation at peace, crime low, trade booming, festivals every night. The world government points at Dressrosa and says, see, our alliance brings stability, our justice brings light. And for a moment you almost believe it. But what happens when the sun is too perfect? When every smile lasts a second too long? Pattern interrupt. A child trips in front of Tashigi and doesn't cry. She laughs instead, eyes wide, like she's terrified of her own tears. A toy soldier salutes a marine officer, then freezes, as if remembering something he shouldn't. Nami notices shipping records that don't match the cheerful ports. Zoro senses fighters in the Colosseum who never seem to go home. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from below the cobblestones. Underground, the sunlight dies. Toy workers labour in shadowy corridors. Smile factories churn out artificial power, and the same laughing kingdom above becomes a muffled echo. Here, the sun symbol on marine coats feels like a spotlight used for interrogation, not warmth. Isn't this the same trick the world government plays everywhere, using the imagery of dawn to hide an age of darkness? In this alternate timeline, Dressrosa becomes a mirror. The toys, stripped of names and pasts, reflect the way marine officers lose themselves to orders. The four smiles mirror the propaganda posters, promising freedom while crushing it. Doflamingo's kingdom is a fake sun of entertainment, bright, loud, and utterly cold. And then Luffy laughs. Not the polished laugh of a model officer at a ceremony, but that raw, ridiculous Nika-like joy that bends rules as easily as it bends rubber. His laughter doesn't demand that people smile back. It gives them permission to stop, to cry, to rage, to remember. Under an honest sky, he tears down the strings instead of tightening them, and the people of Dressrosa finally feel the heat of a real dawn, one that might burn the Marines' halo clean off. If a single kingdom can expose that difference, what happens when the entire world starts comparing the two suns? If Dressrosa is one kingdom waking up, Whole Cake Island is an entire nation learning to love its cage. Picture this, morning over Totoland, but the light isn't coming from the horizon. It's coming from a grinning face in the sky. In canon, Big Mum's territory is a wonderland, where the very sun and clouds talk back, where Prometheus and Zeus float overhead like loyal pets, and the forests sing because her soul is literally rooted in the ground. Not a world guided by natural rhythms, but one where the weather itself is held hostage to a Yonko's mood swings. In this alternate timeline, that same sugar-coated nightmare becomes a political stage. The world government is bleeding authority. The idea of marine justice fraying after Dressrosa and other quiet scandals, where the higher-ups broker a fragile non-aggression pact with Big Mom, dressing fear up as diplomacy. They send Luffy's marine unit as honoured guests to a grand wedding meant to stabilise the seas. Not a bounty poster this time, but an invitation. Not open war, but a shared illusion of peace. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from the moment their ship crosses into Totoland. The sea is calm, the sky is clear. The colours are soft and inviting, almost storybook. And then the sun literally blinks. A massive, blazing homie with a cartoonish face stretches, yawns and rises because Big Mom commands it to. Prometheus isn't just a weapon now. He's an entire artificial sun on rails, rising and setting on schedule like a stage light in a theatre. What happens when a tyrant can decide, on a whim, when people are allowed to feel warmth? Here, the symbolism cuts brutally close to the Marines. The sun is conditional. If Big Mom is pleased, the day is bright, the harvests are good, the homies sing. If she rages, clouds crowd in, the sky darkens, and even the candy rivers seem to recoil. She doesn't just tax their food, she taxes their daylight. It's the same bargain the world government offers the world. Obedience in exchange for carefully managed light. Angie feels it first. He's walking through a sun-drenched plaza, food stalls glittering, and he realizes every smiling chef is smiling because the sky says they have to. His dream of feeding anyone, anytime, collides with a reality where even mealtime happens on someone else's clock. Is food still comfort if the sun above your plate can be switched off? Nami looks up and does the math. No trade winds, no true currents, no natural weather patterns, just a closed system, a climate that exists to flatter an emperor and secure a treaty. For a navigator whose dreams once rode on understanding the real sea, this is a horror story. How do you chart freedom under a painted sky? Chopper, the doctor, notices what the others miss. The plants bloom on cue. People sleep and wake on cue. Circadian rhythms aren't guided by nature anymore, but by Big Mom's temper. He sees stress disorders, chronic exhaustion, children whose bodies never learn what a real night is. If the sun is a prescription here, who controls the dosage? And Luffy, he doesn't have the words for any of that. He just knows it feels wrong. His strength as a Marine captain was always tied to instinctive protection, to rushing toward whatever felt unjust. Standing beneath this obedient sun, he can sense the same wrongness he felt under the world government's spotless banners. In this alternate timeline, a Nika awakening here wouldn't just be another power-up. It would be a wild, laughing sun crashing through a painted backdrop. Gear 5's chaotic, joyful light erupting under Big Mom's artificial dawn would shatter two illusions at once. The Yonko's promise of safety and the Marines' claim to orderly justice. What happens when a real, uncontrollable sun appears in a sky that was never meant to change? Gear 5 answers that question by tearing the sky open. White hair every single week. White clothes. White smoke rolling off his body like steam from a sun that refuses to set. Picture this. In this alternate timeline, Marineford's orderly battlefield is suddenly warped as Luffy's body stretches, squashes, and rebounds with cartoon logic, the ground itself bouncing like rubber under his feet. His heartbeat drums that familiar rhythm, and it feels as if the sun itself is laughing through him, bending reality to match whatever wild image flashes through his mind. Not a solemn god of judgment, but a ridiculous god of freedom. Not a dignified Marine captain, but a living, breathing punchline to the world government's sense of order. Every punch lands with exaggerated force, every fall becomes a joke, every cannonball twists into a balloon, the sky brightens around him even if it is midnight, as if the world refuses to let darkness sit comfortably when Nika has awakened. What happens when a battlefield built on fear suddenly feels like a playground? For the world government, this is not just inconvenient. It is a nightmare made flesh. The power they buried in myth, the sun god tied to liberation and the dawn of the world, has awakened not in some distant pirate, but inside one of their own decorated Marine captains. Their supposed symbol of light justice in pristine white coats now stands next to a man whose very presence turns their authority into slapstick. A celestial dragon watching this broadcast would not see a loyal weapon. They would see Fisher Tiger's sun tattoo, Joy Boy's broken promise, and the Revolutionary Army's rising sun flag all laughing in their faces. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from inside the ranks. Some Marines stare at Gear 5 Luffy like a miracle. To them, he is justice finally unleashed from paperwork and protocol, a strength that protects civilians first and orders second. Others recoil, whispering words like abomination and myth, remembering forbidden stories about Nika that were never supposed to be real. In smoky briefing rooms, higher-ups argue, do they brand him a radiant hero of justice, parading his victories, or quietly plan an accident before that laughing sun burns through their carefully managed darkness? In this alternate timeline, Luffy's laughter does something Fisher Tiger's rage never could. The Sun Pirates carved their symbol over slave brands, a sun that screamed, "We suffered." Their journey was born from pain, from chains, from blood and Mariejo's stone. Gear 5 doesn't erase that. It refuses to let that be the only story. The same sun that once marked trauma now dances across a Marine captain who turns courtroom trials into farce, chains into skipping ropes, and execution platforms into dance floors where fear slips on banana peels. So, you have to ask yourself, can a Marine coat really contain a god of freedom whose very existence turns oppression into unintentional comedy? Or will this laughing sun force Luffy to burn through the uniform entirely and step fully into the role of Dawnbringer, even if that dawn means the Marines themselves become the next shadow to be chased away? And if that happens, whose justice survives the sunrise? So if Luffy himself is a walking sunrise the Marines can't quite look at directly, then what about the people who are born with dawn etched into their very names? Picture this: a quiet archive room in Marineford, late at night, stacks of red-stamped dossiers, and one tiny forbidden letter tying them all together. Anan has always whispered about that letter. The will of D hangs over One Piece like a storm front waiting to break. People with the initial D smile in the face of death. They clash again and again with the celestial dragons and the world government's frozen idea of justice. From Goldie Roger laughing at his own execution, to Portgas D Hu, Ace grinning through the flames, to Trafalgar D Waterloo defying fated extinction, they move like thunderheads. You're told, again and again, that a great storm is coming, one that will upend the current order. In this alternate timeline, that storm has a more precise name. What happens when you treat that D not just as a mystery, but as an abbreviation? D as dawn. D as the promise that no age of darkness and no counterfeit blinding daylight can last forever. D-bearers become natural enemies of any system that tries to stop time, whether that means plunging the world into fear or locking it in a sterile noon where nothing is allowed to change. Their smiles at death aren't recklessness, they're faith that something brighter waits beyond the curtain. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from inside the institution. The Marines, serving the world government, cannot publicly admit that an inherited will exists, that their justice cannot tame. So they do what bureaucracies always do. They rename it. Internally, D-bearers are tagged as D-class anomalies, not pirates, not heroes, anomalies. Each file comes with 3 branching paths: monitor, promote, or eliminate. Show obedience and useful strength. You get medals, a bigger ship, a chance to be paraded as proof that the system works. Show too much independent will, too much hunger for freedom. Your missions get riskier. Your accidents become more likely. Here's the pattern interrupt. Some of the most decorated Marine officers in this AU secretly carry that initial. A Vice Admiral whose middle name is scrubbed from public records. A Rear Admiral whose family archive is sealed. The storm sits inside the very fortress built to keep it out. And then there's Monkey D. Luffy. His dossier is a contradiction written in ink and fear. As a D-bearer and the host of the Nika fruit, he's flagged twice over. One classification brands him potential hero of the sun, an asset who can be pointed at pirates, revolutionaries, even rogue celestial dragon plots when the world government needs a smiling symbol. Another page, locked behind Gorosei clearance, labels him a catastrophic dawn event. Not a person, but a predicted tipping point. If his dreams ever outrun his orders, the age of darkness ends, and so does Marine supremacy. So the will of D becomes the story's built-in failsafe. No matter how tightly the Marines try to grip the sun, No matter how many D-class anomalies they reclassify, promote, or quietly erase, someone will always be born who laughs at the scaffold, kicks open the shutters, and lets the real light in. The only question left is this: when that final D smiles at the end of the world government's night, will the Marines stand against the dawn or march beside it? Midnight over the Grand Line, the moon high, but every whisper in the currents is about a sun that never rose. Before Luffy ever put on a marine coat in this alternate timeline, another man reached the horizon first. Goldie Roger stood on Laugh Tale with his crew, the real One Piece beneath his feet, the true history laid bare around him. He saw the ancient kingdom, the world government's original crime, the promise of a dawn of the world. And what did he do? He laughed. Not because it was a joke, but because the story was beautiful and brutally mistimed. It was a sunrise scheduled for a sky that wasn't ready. Roger understood something terrifying. If he tried to light that sun himself, the world would burn instead of bloom. So he chose restraint over glory. He scattered his will, trusted the next generation, and walked to his own execution smiling, as if he were stepping into the shadow before a brighter day. Not a king of pirates in this what-if scenario, but a man who refused to force the dawn. And then there was Oden. Kozuki Oden, the man who danced like a fool to keep Wano alive, the man whose clan carved the poneglyphs that hide suns in stone. His dream was simple, almost naive: open Wano's borders so it could welcome Joy Boy and that long-promised morning. He spoke of a great war, a tide that would sweep across the world once the borders fell, but he died in boiling oil. With the sky still dark, his followers ordered to wait, not years, but decades, for the sun he'd glimpsed in prophecy. In this alternate timeline, the world government could not let those two men remain symbols of hope. So the Marine records rewrote them. Roger became a reckless romantic who would have unleashed a false sun, a chaotic age masquerading as freedom. Oden became a deluded isolationist whose obsession with legends would have plunged the seas into endless war. Their smiles were redacted into warnings. This is what happens when you chase a dawn that isn't sanctioned. But Garp was there. He saw Roger's real smile on that last day. He heard the laughter that sounded less like madness and more like relief. And now, serving under the same banner that executed his rival, he sees that identical grin on Luffy's face every time his grandson breaks protocol to save a stranger. What happens when the man who embodies marine strength realizes their justice might be the clouds smothering the horizon? Under the fluorescent lights of Marine headquarters, Garp starts to notice the pattern. The Ds who laugh at death, the suppressed histories, the quiet fear whenever anyone mentions the dawn. In this alternate timeline, the second attempt at sunrise isn't coming from a pirate ship on the edge of the map. It's rising from inside the Marine ranks themselves. That's what makes Luffy's era different and far more dangerous. The first dawn could be executed, boiled, and buried under propaganda. This one wears a uniform. This one files reports, earns medals, and inspires subordinates before he ever becomes a traitor. How do you extinguish a sun that's already inside your own walls? How do you arrest a dawn that's printed on your payroll? Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from one more angle. When the next Joy Boy laughs, he won't just be laughing at the scaffold, he'll be laughing in the briefing room, on the deck of a marine battleship, in the middle of a mission stamped with official approval. The world government can brand Roger and Oden as cautionary tales, but they can't stop their light from refracting through Luffy, Zoro, Nami and Sanji as they rise through the system. So when this second sun finally breaches the horizon, it won't be a clean revolution from the outside. It will be a fracture from within. Allies will become enemies, enemies will become unexpected comrades, and the very institution built to hold back the dawn will find the dawn beating in its own chest. The night is still long, but the sky over Marineford is already turning grey. The question now isn't just whether the Marines will stand against the dawn or march beside it, but which of them will realise too late that they were the sunrise all along. The sky over Marineford is turning grey, but inside Mary Joyce, The sky is already scripted. Not by clouds, but by reports. I've read stamped memos that define what the sun is allowed to mean. Picture this. Officially, the world government calls itself the light. 800 years ago, their historians say, there was only an age of darkness. Lawless seas, tyrant kingdoms, weapons that could erase islands in a heartbeat. In this alternate timeline, schoolbooks across every blue repeat the same line. The 20 kings united, ended the chaos and brought order, justice and stability to a terrified world. The sun, they claim, rose the day the world government was born. But you've seen the cracks in that story, haven't you? The poneglyphs whisper a different version. The Kozuki Crest, once you peel away the snakes, hides a circle like a quiet sun. Fishman Island's prophecy speaks not of darkness defeated, but of a coming dawn of the world that will finally end oppression. Not an age of monsters, but an age of shared prosperity under a different sun. One that didn't answer to Marie Geowise. What happens when you realize the so-called darkness might simply have been a light they couldn't control? Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from inside the highest offices. In confidential memos, the term dawn of the world isn't poetic. It's classified as an existential threat. One line repeats like a mantra. If dawn comes, our monopoly on justice, law, and light dissolves. To them, dawn means decentralized power. Local laws not stamped by the celestial dragons. Freedom of movement between races. Even the idea that people could decide for themselves what justice looks like terrifies them. Because if the sun belongs to everyone, what is left for the kings who crown themselves its owners? So policy bends around that fear. Buster calls don't just target dangerous pirates, they gravitate toward islands where the sun is loved too loudly. An archaeologist digs near a poneglyph that mentions dawn, fire. A kingdom raises a flag, with a rising sun motif suspiciously close to the revolutionary armies, fire. When Fisher Tiger turns the sun into a mark of freedom, former slaves burning over their hoof brands with a new emblem. The response is immediate. Crush the sun pirates, classify their symbol as terrorism, bury the story of why that tattoo exists. Fishman Island becomes a pressure point. The prophecy of a human who will bring the dawn. In internal marine briefings, it's rephrased as potential extremist messiah narrative. Guard the gate, control the traffic, rewrite the legend. In this alternate timeline, even Nika is treated not as myth, but as contraband. Any image of a laughing, sun-backed figure is flagged. Gear 5's radiant, impossible freedom isn't just a power-up, it's a censorship crisis. Because in the end, the world government doesn't just fear pirates or revolutionaries, it fears a story about the sun that people might love more than theirs. And if one smiling captain in a white coat starts to embody that forbidden dawn, whose version of the sky will your crew believe when the real sun finally rises? So when that smiling captain in a white coat starts to feel like the real dawn, you hit the core inversion of this entire what-if scenario. Picture this. In canon, the Straw Hats chase the horizon under a skull and straw hat flag, racing the sunrise itself. In this alternate timeline, they march beneath seagulls and justice coats, serving a world government that insists, over and over, we're already the daylight. Not pirates chasing the sun, but officers enforcing it. Not outlaws under an open sky, but state heroes patrolling a carefully controlled morning. Luffy is the sharpest contrast. Normally, the sun finds him. It crowns his Gear 5. It answers his laughter. It bends to his freedom. Here, the sun is handed to him as a medal. He's paraded as the radiant symbol of marine justice, a living poster boy whose strength sells the illusion that the system itself is the source of warmth. What happens when the sun god's heir is told from day one that the spotlight belongs to the institution, not the boy who shines in it? Jinbe's struggle cuts even deeper. The sun once burned on his skin as rebellion, the mark that covered a slave's hoof brand and proclaimed Fisher Tiger's impossible dream. In this alternate timeline, that same tattoo sits under a marine coat. He's still a helmsman, still a guardian, but now he escorts government envoys past Fishman Island's prophecies of a coming dawn. Is he honouring Tiger by changing the Marines from within, or dimming that legacy by saluting the very age of darkness Tiger raged against? Robin feels the heat differently. She is the keeper of solar history, the woman who can read the poneglyphs that speak of the dawn of the world, Joy Boy, and the Kozuki clan's hidden sun crest. As a marine scholar, she's praised for controlled knowledge, while entire chapters about Nika, about the true meaning of the sun, are quietly blacked out. She files reports by day and hoards forbidden rays of truth by night. How long can you live in an archive of censored sunlight before you start to burn? And the others? Nami now drafts navigation routes that literally decide who gets to stand in the sun of marine protection and who is left in the shadows of acceptable collateral. And Boro polishes his swords under a blazing sky that keeps asking whether his oath is to a flag or to the man who laughs like sunrise. Sanji cooks for admirals who toast to peace while banning the very transparency that real peace requires. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from a wider angle. In our world, regimes brand themselves as light all the time. Enlightened empires, radiant republics, shining unions. Institutions wrap themselves in suns while building windowless rooms. They plaster rays on flags and seals, then fear any real transparency that might expose the machinery behind that glow. Individuals inside those systems face the same question this crew does. Which part of your identity can bend to survive, and which part snaps the moment someone tries to own your daylight? Here, the sun becomes a stress test. Put inherently free-spirited adventurers inside uniforms that monopolize solar imagery, and you see what changes and what refuses too. Remain frank but not orders that eclipse joy. Nami can manage taxes, but not when they blot out freedom. Robin can wear the crest, but not if it erases the true dawn written in stone. Pattern interrupt. Imagine the final war in this AU, and notice what you just pictured first. Not ships, not cannons. The sky. Because now that we've mapped how every marine straw hat bends or breaks, under a captured sun, we can zoom back into the specific future events that will decide everything. When the true dawn of the world finally arrives, when Joy Boy's promise collides with the world government's artificial daylight, whose light will each of them stand in? In the coming sections, we'll walk through that last adventure, the final war, the real sunrise, and the moment this alternate timeline has to choose which sun survives. Picture this. The last war doesn't begin with a single cannon shot, but with a sky that looks wrong. Noon over Mary Geoise, the Holy Land hanging above the red line, yet the sun is dimmed, its light strangely thin, as if the world itself is holding its breath. In canon, you expect every faction to be there when that breath finally releases, right? The Marines, the Revolutionaries, the Yonko crews, maybe even remnants of the ancient kingdom, all colliding over who gets to define justice and freedom. In this alternate timeline, all of that still converges on the same stage, but the conflict sharpens into something almost mythic, a battle of suns. Not just armies clashing, but competing dawns. On one side, you have the marine sun of justice, the emblem that has flown over your entire journey so far. It's order, safety, and the familiar daylight of the world government's rule. On another, the Revolutionary Army's rising sun, already baked into their flag, promising a new morning that burns away the old regime. And above them both, breaking through the clouds, the half-forgotten Nika sun, the Joy Boy light carried in Luffy's body and whispered about in poneglyphs. What happens when those three lights try to occupy the same sky? The battlefield itself starts to answer. Mary Geoise stands proud at first, its palaces blazing with artificial illumination, bubble chandeliers, Vegapunk spotlights, pacifista beams cutting through the haze. But as Nika's influence grows, reality tilts. The true sun is partially eclipsed not by the moon, but by a swirling halo of white drumming clouds that pulse with Gear 5 laughter. One by one, the artificial lights flicker, crack and fail, like the world government's version of daylight is being unplugged. Under that warped sky, the Straw Hat Marines finally fracture. his straw hat still perched firmly on his head, though now it carries a different meaning. Luffy steps forward as something the Marines cannot categorize. Some of the crew stay with the Marine Son of Justice, clinging to structure even as they question the orders coming from above. Can Zoro really abandon the oath that shaped his strength, even if that oath has been twisted? Others peel away towards Dragon's Banner, drawn to a revolutionary sunrise that at least offers a plan, a symbol, a clear enemy to topple. And then there's the core that follows Luffy, not into a uniform future, but into an undefined space beyond both institutions. Nami, staring at that broken sky, has to choose controlled navigation under marine charts, coordinated rebellion under Dragon's maps, or a wild adventure chasing a laughing sun that refuses to belong to anyone. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario as a question of faith. When the dust settles, the real victory isn't just which army stands, but which sun people decide to believe in. The next step is simple. Who walks into which dawn and why? In this alternate timeline, the sky over Marineford is no longer a pure blinding white. The sun that rises now is contested, fractured between flags, between ideals, between the very people who once swore the same oath. In this alternate timeline, when that new light finally breaks, the question is no longer who is a Marine, but who dares to stay one under this sun. Zoro is the easiest and the hardest to read. His journey began with order, with a uniform that gave his strength direction, not one that defined his justice. His loyalty has never been to the world government, but to the idiot in the straw hat who keeps charging toward freedom. What happens when a Buster Call is issued on an island Luffy swears to protect? And the moment the Marine Coat demands he cut down Luffy's chosen son, Zoro's choice is already made. The coat comes off. The swords stay. His justice follows the man, not the emblem. Nami, meanwhile, was always suspicious of maps drawn by other people. Her trauma under Arlong, a pirate who thrived because Marines and nobles looked away, taught her exactly how institutions can weaponize silence. Weak. She joined to control the tides of information, to track tribute routes, tax lines, and quiet extermination orders. But the more she charts, the more she sees the same hoofmark patterns Fisher Tiger once burned away with the sun. Once she has enough knowledge to navigate a freer world, why cling to a system that profits from storms? She walks off the warship with her own atlas of rebellion tucked under her arm. Usopp and Chopper are different. They like the idea of a safe harbour. Usopp loves the glory of a Marine sniper's coat, the way it finally makes people listen when he shouts orders. Chopper finds comfort in regulated hospitals, in clean corridors and official funding for medicine. Yet under the dawn of Nika's laughing sun, recognition without courage rings hollow. Can you really call yourself a brave warrior of the sea if your sharpshooting only protects the strong? And call yourself a doctor if you're ordered not to treat the wrong patients? The true dawn corners them gently but firmly. Keep the institutional shield, or step into genuine heroism where every cure and every shot is a risk. Sanji, Robin, Frankie, Brook and Jinbe were never meant to be permanent enforcers. Sanji's cooking is a sun of its own, meant to feed anyone who's hungry, not just officers with clearance. Robin carries the memory of an erased century, of a world government that tried to blot out the very idea of a dawn. Frankie builds ships that want to chase the horizon, not patrol it. Brook's music has always called people toward joy, like a distant sunrise over a battlefield. Jinbe, tied to Fisher Tiger and the Sun Pirates, knows better than anyone that a uniform can't cage a symbol. In this what-if scenario, they don't just defect, they become architects of a post-marine world where the sun is shared, not licensed. And here's the twist. Even with all these divergences, the story quietly bends back toward canon in spirit. The crew still drifts toward the same sunrise, the same inherited will of Joy Boy and Nika, even if their route passes through Marine HQ first. So when that final order comes down, when the world government demands one last act in the name of justice, who is still wearing a coat and who has already stepped into the light, the answer to that might start with one defiant laugh and a burning sun no cannon can shoot down. That burning sun no cannon can shoot down doesn't just have to be poetic. Picture this: high noon over the Grand Line. No clouds, no shadows. Just a blinding white sky, as if the world itself forgot how to turn. What happens when the dawn of the world isn't just a metaphor for justice and freedom, but the activation code for a weapon? In this alternate timeline of the Void Century, imagine an ancient kingdom that didn't just worship the sun, it engineered it. Not one that begged for light, but one that bent it. Massive floating mirrors in the upper atmosphere. Sky-based lenses that could concentrate sunlight into spears. Climate engines that could shift entire jet streams, turning calm seas into permanent storms. The age of gods the world government whispers about. Maybe it was just science so advanced it looked divine. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from the perspective of the Marines and the world government. If such solar technology once existed, then every mention of dawn, every sun tattoo, every smiling Nika silhouette becomes more than dangerous ideology. It becomes a potential ignition key. Is that why the celestial dragons branded slaves with their own hoof, and Fisher Tiger sun pirates covered it with a blazing sun, unknowingly echoing the sigil of the very tech that could burn Mary Geowise out of the sky? Now flip the angle. In this theory, the world government isn't just censoring history, it's guarding a reactor. Deep in some sealed facility, maybe under the Red Line itself, are fragments of those mirrors. Dormant weather arrays, half-functional climate nodes. Classified reports warn of an eternal noon, a past catastrophe where the sun was locked overhead until oceans boiled and islands cracked. If Luffy, with a fruit tied to the sun god Nika, awakens the right resonance, could he literally resync that system? This is where Franky and Vegapunk become terrifyingly central. In this alternate timeline, picture them as an uneasy duo in a hidden marine lab. Vegapunk is ordered to recreate the ancient solar network as the ultimate deterrent. Franky is brought in for his raw engineering strength and his shipwright's instinct for balance. Publicly, it's about power. Secretly, Franky is threading failsafes into every mirror array, every beam channel. One wrong command, and instead of eternal noon, the system diffuses sunlight, breaking storm belts, punching holes of blue sky through the Red Line's artificial darkness. Suddenly, the dawn of the world becomes literal. Not just new ideas, but new light patterns. Whole regions that lived under constant thunder, like the seas around Fishman Island, or the storm-wrapped routes the Marines used to control adventure, could be bathed in gentle daylight for the first time. Imagine the Revolutionary Army's rising sun flag as not just symbolism, but a map to where those beams will hit. Even if this solar weapon never appears in canon, thinking this way explains the story's paranoia. Why does the world government react like heresy to a smile, a drumbeat, a sun-shaped crest? Because whether the weapon is real or not, the narrative treats the sun as if it could physically rewrite the world. And that fear is what gives every sunrise in One Piece its weight. If the sun can terrify the world government that much, then the next question is simple. Where's Oda hiding it from you? Picture this. You rewatch a scene you've known for years, and suddenly there's a quiet little sun in the corner of the panel, pulsing with meaning you never noticed. Start with one of the most emotional beats in the entire journey, Luffy, placing his hat on Nami's head in Arlong Park. Behind them, the sky is bright, the clouds parted, and a soft, almost halo-like sun hangs over the ruined map room. Not one that screams for attention, but one that silently frames Nami's choice to seek freedom instead of submission. When the Going Merry first sets sail with the full early crew, the sun is low over the east blue. Not a blazing noon, but a gentle rising light that says, this adventure is only beginning. Those panels aren't just pretty backdrops. They're visual verdicts on the justice of what just happened. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario. What happens when you track every sunrise and sunset that closes a flashback? Think of Nami's liberation, Robin's I Want to Live, and even Fisher Tiger's story. Again and again, Oda ends despair with a horizon shot, the sun either dipping or emerging. Not darkness, but dawn. Not an end, but a pause before the next push toward freedom. And it's not only in the sky. The world is littered with suns if you know where to look. Tavern signs in little East Blue ports carry round golden emblems. Regional flags show simple circles with radiating lines. Minor pirate crews, who will never rival the Marines, still paint crude sunbursts on sails, as if every nobody with a ship is echoing Nika without even knowing his name. The Revolutionary Army's rising sun motif. The Kozuki Crest that hides a sun once the snakes are removed. The Sun Pirates' own Jolly Roger. All of it turns the seas into a silent referendum against the current age. Even character names and attacks participate in this quiet rebellion. Techniques that invoke morning, light, or radiance tend to arrive at turning points in battle. The moment when despair flips into possibility. A beam, a flash, a dawn strike. Each one feels like a miniature Gear 5, a tiny Nika laugh tearing through rigid marine justice. So here's your mission. In this alternate timeline where you're the investigator, go back through episodes and chapters with the sun in mind. How many background orbs, radiant flags, or light-themed attacks can you spot once you start hunting them? The more you find, the more deliberate Oda's patterning becomes, like a metronome ticking beneath every clash between authority and freedom. Drop your favourite hidden sun moment in the comments. If you've got a panel, episode number, or even a tiny tavern sign we missed, share it. We'll feature the sharpest finds in a future breakdown or community post, and together we'll push even closer to understanding what that final dawn of the world is really going to look like. So now that you're seeing suns hidden in tattoos, flags and crests, we need to talk about the most unsettling part of that light. The way One Piece ties freedom to joy. Not just to victory, not just to survival, but to the ability to laugh, dance and smile while the world government tightens the noose. Picture this, a burning plaza, a public execution, and yet the story keeps returning to people grinning beneath the gallows. From Roger's final smile to Oden's boiling dance, sunlight and warmth are framed as the courage to laugh in the face of death. In this alternate timeline, Marine Captain Luffy is trained to believe that a peaceful island is one where citizens smile up at the banner of justice like flowers turning toward the sun. But whose sun is that, really? Canon already warns you. Dressrosa's toy-filled streets, the fake festivals, the forced parades under Doflamingo's rule, all of it is a grotesque imitation of Nika's promised joy. Not genuine freedom, but curated happiness. In this what-if scenario, the Marines sometimes do the same thing with better uniforms. Propaganda posters of children smiling under the radiant emblem of marine justice. Broadcasts insisting that a loyal citizen is a cheerful citizen. What happens when a frown becomes suspicious? When grief itself looks like treason against the light? That's where Nika's laughter turns complicated. The sun god is framed as a liberator, a deity of drums, dancing, and ridiculous elasticity. Yet a god of freedom who can warp reality risks becoming detached from the fragile bodies he's saving. If everything is rubber, if the battlefield is a cartoon, does the collateral damage still hurt the same? Or does the promise that one day you'll laugh about this become its own kind of cruelty? In this alternate timeline, Gear 5 Luffy crashes into marine strongholds and world government fortresses with that same unstoppable grin. And for some people, his absurdity is healing. A former slave on a liberated island watches the sky turn white and bouncy, sees the sun shape shockwaves, and finally laughs for the first time since Fisher Tiger died. But another survivor, whose family was killed during a joyful raid, looks at Luffy's rubbery antics and feels like their trauma has been turned into a stage gag. Pattern interrupt. What if the dawn itself feels like an insult? You start to see it on the faces in the crowd. As some dance with the crew in the rubble, others stand at the edge of the party, eyes fixed on the rising sun of the Revolutionary Army's flag. They want freedom, but they also want their pain honoured. The true dawn of the world can't be a spotlight demanding constant performance. If the sun in One Piece is going to mean anything by the end of this adventure, It has to make room for shadows. Justice without joy becomes tyranny, but joy without justice becomes mockery. The future Luffy fights for must be one where you're allowed to cry at noon, where the sun shines on laughter and on grief, and no god, not even Nika, gets to decide which smile is correct. If the sun has to make room for shadows, then it can't belong to just one sky. Picture this: 3 different suns hanging over the same ocean, each promising a different kind of tomorrow. One burns for freedom, one glares for justice, one glows softly for loyalty. In One Piece terms, freedom is simple and terrifying at the same time. It's the right to chase your dreams on the open sea, no guarantee of safety, no promise of rescue, just the wind, the waves, and your will. Not a freedom licensed by the world government, but a freedom claimed in spite of it. In this alternate timeline, that wild light is Nika's sun, the laughing blaze behind Luffy's Gear 5, the same dawn Fisher Tiger believed in when he branded slaves with the sun to overwrite the celestial dragon's hoof. Justice, by contrast, is the sun nailed into place. For the Marines, true justice means order, safety, predictability, a world where noon never ends, where you never have to fear what creeps in the dark because the dark is never allowed to fall. Their justice is a controlled star, like a spotlight from Marejwe, bleaching out nuance so that pirates are always villains and the world government is always right. What happens when you grow up under that light? You stop asking who gets burned. Then there is loyalty, the third sun, not blazing above, but burning between people. It's the campfire the crew gathers around after the battle, the glow that makes you choose your friends over your flag. Loyalty is what makes a Marine hesitate when an order clashes with a promise. It's what forces characters to navigate between freedom and justice, never fully surrendering to either. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario by mapping the Straw Hats across this triangle. Luffy stands closest to Nika's sun, even in uniform. His justice is instinctive. Protect the weak, break the chains, laugh loud. He tries to drag that dawn into marine daylight, but every clash with Alabasta call, every cover-up, pushes him further from the institution and closer to outright rebellion. Because once you start watching the sun like that, you realize it's been guiding this entire journey. Picture this: we opened on an alternate marine ford, not at midnight despair, but at a weaponized sunrise, not a dawn of freedom, but a carefully staged victory shot for the Marines. From there you walked with this crew through a full alternate timeline, watching Luffy, Zoro, Nami and Sanji wear uniforms that never quite fit, even as the world government tried to drape them in its version of justice. In this alternate timeline, every character arc became a stress test. Luffy chasing adventure under marine orders, Zoro pledging strength to a code he didn't respect, Nami navigating taxes and tariffs instead of treasure, Sanji feeding admirals while dreaming of a restaurant that answered to no one. What happens when you force those dreams into a system built on control? The seam split, and the sun motif showed you exactly where. We scaled up from there. By saga, you watched marine-branded Eni's lobby, a whitewashed Dressrosa, a Sabaody where the Straw Hats enforced the very chains they were born to break. Each rewrite pushed one question: can the sun be turned into a spotlight for authority instead of a beacon for freedom? On paper, yes. In practice, no. The light kept leaking out of the frame. And then we dove into the deepest lore. Joy Boy's broken promise. Nika's silhouette dancing across slave stories. Fishman Island's prophecy of a coming dawn. The Sun Pirates burning the hoof of a celestial dragon into a new emblem of liberation. You saw how the same symbol that once freed Fisher Tiger's people now burns inside Luffy's Gear 5, where the sun stops being metaphor and becomes movement, laughter, rubber reality itself. That's the core takeaway. The sun in One Piece is freedom reclaimed from slavery, a promise that pain will not be the final word. It can be painted onto marine flags as propaganda, turned into bright backdrops for staged executions, but the meaning slips. You watch that play out as our AU Straw Hats tried to embody marine justice and failed, because the parts of them that matter most, Luffy's joy, Zoro's honor, Nami's hunger for true security, Sanji's compassion refused to be absorbed. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from one last angle. By imagining them as enforcers, you highlighted what they can never enforce. You can order arrests, you cannot order a dawn. That's the mission of Anime Autopsy. Not just to recap adventure, but to dissect it. To treat symbols like the sun, the will of D, the very idea of justice as organs in a living story. We cut into structure, trace arteries of meaning, and show you how themes circulate through flags, tattoos, attacks, even the timing of a sunrise. So if you want to keep prying open this world's hidden architecture, this is your crew. Check that you're subscribed, drop your own sun sightings in the comments, and tell me, where do you think the next dawn will break? On Luffy's smile, on a burning flag, or on the ruins of the world government itself? Because this investigation isn't ending here. It's only moving to the next horizon. So now I want to hand the torch to you, because this isn't just my investigation into the sun, it's ours. Picture this. You're rereading One Piece. You flip a page you've seen 100 times, and suddenly a tiny sun on a flag, a background panel, or a throwaway line snaps into focus. What was that moment for you? Was it the Sun Pirates Jolly Roger, the hidden sun in the Kozuki Crest once the snakes are gone, or Luffy's Gear 5 silhouette blazing like a miniature dawn over Onigashima? Tell me your favourite hidden sun in the comments. The one detail that once you noticed it permanently changed how you saw that scene. Maybe it was Fisher Tiger's sun tattoo covering the Celestial Dragon brand. Maybe it was the Revolutionary Army's rising sun flag. Maybe it was a single panel of light breaking through clouds when the world government thought it had everything under control. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario together, panel by panel, because now we step into theory territory. Do you think there was once a literal sun kingdom erased in the void century? Or is the sun purely symbolic, a language of freedom that keeps resurfacing through Joy Boy, Nika, and Luffy? What happens when you line them up? Joy Boy's ancient promise, Nika's laughter and liberation, and a rubber boy whose Gear 5 turns him into a living, grinning sun. Are we looking at one world wearing different names, multiple legends orbiting the same truth? Or something stranger that even Vegapunk hasn't fully mapped yet? In this alternate timeline with our Marine Straw Hat crew, I want your read on them too. Which Straw Hat, wearing justice on their back, would actually be the most terrifying Marine once they start chasing any false dawns the world government points at? Is it Zoro enforcing orders with overwhelming strength, or Nami weaponizing navigation and taxation against entire islands? And then, who defects first the moment the real meaning of the sun becomes impossible to ignore? Luffy when he sees slaves branded under the hooves, Robin when she connects the poneglyphs to the dawn of the world, or Sanji when he realizes hunger is being used as a leash instead of a problem to solve. If you enjoyed this long-form breakdown, this whole cold open world building style adventure, make sure you like the video and actually check that you're subscribed. A lot of you think you are, and the world government, the algorithm, says otherwise. Actually thinks devil fruits are the main mystery, and tell them we're chasing the sun instead. Because we're not done. Next, we'll tie this solar trail directly into the Will of D, the Void Century, and Vegapunk's research as the manga reveals more, following every mention of dawn like it's a flare in the dark. The question is, when we finally reach that last horizon, will the sun be salvation or the thing that burns the world bare? But before we dock this analysis and call it a night, let's flip the sky for a second. We've spent hours chasing the sun. But what happens when you imagine a world where the emblem over Marineford isn't radiant gold, but a cold silver crescent hanging over everything like an unblinking eye? Picture this. Late night over the Holy Land, the moon high, the stars distant, the world government's banners washed in pale light instead of dawn. Not a world that marches towards sunrise, but one that kneels to a permanent, calculated twilight. In this alternate timeline, the Marines don't call themselves the Shield of the Day. They are the arbiters of the night, claiming that only under the moon can true justice remain pure and untouched by the chaos of human desire. In that world, pirates are not creatures of darkness. They are creatures of daylight, bands of reckless sun chasers whose flags blaze with crude suns and burning discs, accused of bringing wild, unpredictable freedom wherever they land. The Revolutionary Army's rising sun insignia? In this what-if scenario, that becomes literal heresy, a symbol of blinding, dangerous light that threatens to melt the careful, frozen order the celestial dragons have built under their moonlit throne. The symbolism inverts. The sun, which we've tied to Fisher Tiger, the Sun Pirates and Nika's laughter, turns into a rogue element, a flare you can't regulate. It stands for warmth that refuses to be rationed, for joy that won't file paperwork first. The moon, by contrast, becomes institutional, not mystery, but surveillance, not romance, but regulation. A distant, reflective authority that shines only with borrowed light, insisting that all strength must be measured, scheduled, and reported. And suddenly, Enel's wild detour to the moon doesn't feel like a side quest anymore. Those ancient automata, the ruins, the hints that a Sky People civilization once watched the world from above, under a lunar marine banner that's not forgotten history. The Void Century becomes a war not just over land and sea, but over which light humanity should answer to. Did a sun-aligned civilization of Joy Boy and the D-Clan defy a cold lunar empire? Did the dawn of the world once literally mean breaking away from a cosmic night shift that wanted everything catalogued, taxed, and quietly obedient? Here's the pattern interrupt. Which version of the Marines feels more terrifying to you? The sun-branded enforcers we know, or a moon-worshipping navy that stares down at you like a telescope you can never turn off? What does your answer say about how you instinctively read these symbols of freedom and control? Because if the sun can be rebellion and the moon can be order, then Oda hasn't just drawn a pirate adventure, he's built a cosmic courtroom. And this little lunar detour is our teaser. Next, we can dive into Enel's space odyssey, the automata, and every hint that One Piece might stretch beyond the seas and into the stars, where the sun and moon are not just background art, but rival thrones. And when you start talking about cosmic courts and rival thrones, there's always someone in the comments ready to say, isn't the sun just cool art? Picture this, one lonely sunset panel, sure, that could be style, but a branded sun over a slave scar, a rising sun on the revolutionary flag, a hidden sun in Wano's crest, and a literal sun god awakening inside Luffy at the supposed dawn of the world? At what point does cool visual become deliberate language? Oda doesn't just draw suns. He places them at pressure points. Fisher Tiger Sun Pirates don't pick a random logo. They use a sun to overwrite the hoof of the celestial dragons. The Kozuki don't carve a random flower. Once the snakes are removed, you get a radiant core. The revolutionaries don't rally under a random circle. They march beneath a rising sun against the world government. And then Gear 5 turns Luffy into a bouncing, laughing embodiment of Nika, framed again and again against blinding white light. Not background. Thesis. But maybe you're thinking, aren't we over-theorizing? Isn't this just reading too much into panels? Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from another angle. In this alternate timeline of analysis, the theory isn't a prophecy. It's a tool. What happens when you stress test a theme by pushing it into extremes? You imagine a sun kingdom, or solar weapons, or a marine Luffy caught between institutional justice and a literal dawn god. You're not claiming Oda must write it that way. You're exploring how far the existing symbolism can stretch before it snaps. And to be clear, some of you will read the sun differently. And that's not just fine, that's the point. You might see the sun primarily as hope for the oppressed, a promise that no night lasts forever. Someone else might focus on the political metaphor, the sun as revolutionary power, burning away the shadow cast by the world government. Another viewer might tie it to inherited will, the same light passing from Joy Boy to Roger to Luffy. Does your version clash with my Marine versus Dawn framing? Or does it run alongside it like another current in the same ocean? So where does canon end and speculation begin? Canon is solid ground. The Sun Pirates and their tattoos, Nika and Gear 5 as a sun god of freedom and joy, the Revolutionary Army's rising sun, Wano's crest hiding a solar core, repeated talk of the world's dawn. Speculation is the bridge we build off that cliff. A lost sun kingdom, ancient solar technology, specific AU events where marine admirals literally try to smother the dawn Luffy represents. If any of that feels like a reach to you, tell me where the line is. Which sun moments feel airtight and which feel like narrative overreach. Drop your questions, your disagreements, your own readings of the sun in the comments. I'm planning a dedicated Q&A and a deeper breakdown, and your pushback is basically fuel. Because if this much light is already canon, what happens when we finally turn it toward the Void Century itself? But let's turn that light into a tool. If the sun really is one of the hidden engines of One Piece, how do you actually re-watch the series through that lens and not just nod along to a theory video? Picture this. You go back to the beginning, but this time you're tracking rays, shadows, and brands the way the world government tracks threats to its justice. Your first anchor point is Arlong Park, early East Blue. Heavy humidity, harsh daylight over Kokoyasi. Not just a tragic Nami backstory, but the prototype of fishman discrimination and economic control. Watch when Nami looks at the sky and when she looks down at her tattoo. Is the sun blazing or hidden when she finally asks for help? Then jump to Sabaody. Different ocean, same wound. Here, the slave brands and the sun pirate's mark collide under the filtered light of the mangrove canopy. Ask yourself, when Fisher Tiger's legacy is mentioned, does Oda show us open sky, or does he keep that sun blocked by roots and bubbles? From there you move to Fishman Island, eternal night under the sea, artificial sun overhead. This is where the dawn of the world stops being a vague phrase and becomes a political threat. Angry mention of dawn. Every time the fake sun tree is framed behind a character talking about freedom. When Shirahoshi cries, is the light soft or harsh? When Luffy declares he'll take her to the surface, what happens to the panel's brightness? Then Wano, closed borders, choked sky, a crest that only reveals a hidden sun once the snakes are stripped away. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario. What if that crest had always been shown in its true form? Would the Kozuki have survived? Or would the Marines and the nobles have crushed them even earlier for daring to carry the dawn? To really feel this, you keep a sun journal. Nothing fancy, just a note app or a notebook where you jot down every explicit or implicit sun reference you notice. Flags, tattoos, Gear 5's halo, Nika's silhouette, the Revolutionary Army's rising symbol, even background suns half buried behind speech bubbles. Do big moral choices cluster at sunrise, midday, sunset, or in the dead of night? Here's the pattern interrupt. In this alternate timeline, imagine the Straw Hats as Marines under a blazing sun-branded flag, enforcing order in each of these arcs. In Arlong Park, are they the ones protecting Nami, or the ones defending a legal treaty? In Sabaody, do they arrest Fisher Tiger's successors or shield them? On Fishman Island, does a Marine Luffy still swear to bring dawn, or does he file a report and move on? What happens when that same sun symbol means state power instead of liberation? Use that contrast to measure the original story. Each time you log a sun moment, ask, is this light protecting freedom or burning it? Finally, bring it back here. Share your wildest sun journal entries in the comments. Turn this channel into a collaborative lore lab, so that by the time we hit the Void Century, we're not guessing in the dark. We're reading the architecture of light together. Because that's what this episode has been doing from the first frame. Picture this. Before you ever saw a like button, you were already under a sky turning gold, watching Fisher Tiger's shadow stretch across the red line, or Luffy laughing in blinding Gear 5 white. No intro card. No thesis statement, just light. That cold open isn't an accident. It's a choice to let your emotions get hooked before your analytical brain starts asking, okay, but what does the sun actually mean? That's the same trick Oda pulls when he opens an arc with a burning flag, a crying child, or a quiet sunrise over a ruined island. Not exposition, but image. Not explanation, but atmosphere. By starting in universe, this video lets you feel the warmth and the danger of the sun motif before we ever say the words symbolism, justice, or world government. You step into the adventure first, and only then do we start dissecting why it feels so heavy. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario from another angle. What happens when a video about a single symbol decides to pace itself like a saga? Long form, layered, almost stubbornly patient. We didn't jump straight from Nika to the Revolutionary Army's rising sun flag in one breath. We walked there. Fisher Tiger's tattoo, the Sun Pirate's Jolly Roger, the Fishman Island prophecy, Wano's hidden sun crest. Only after that journey did Gear 5's blinding radiance feel earned. That slow build isn't filler, it's form mirroring function. Oda seeds suns across hundreds of chapters so that when Luffy's body literally becomes a laughing dawn, your brain screams of course. This video tries to echo that rhythm. Each section is another tiny sunrise, another angle on the same light, until you realize you've been watching one idea gain strength the whole time. You probably noticed how we kept circling back. Marineford's sunrise, Fishman Island's dawn of the world. Fisher Tiger burning away the celestial dragon brand with a sun. Each return is a callback, but also a test. Does this new piece of evidence change how that earlier moment feels? In this alternate timeline where you're not just a viewer but an active law surgeon, those recurring questions keep the whole crew of ideas marching in formation. Because that's what this style really is. Story surgery. We open the body of One Piece on the operating table. We isolate one organ, the sun, and examine it from every side. Flags, tattoos, prophecies, gods, rebellions. Then we stitch the story back together and check the pulse. Does the world's heartbeat, its longing for freedom, sound clearer now? If it does, and you enjoyed being dropped into a cold open before we start cutting, subscribe for more of this cold open world building. Next time we might dissect the sea itself, or the silent pull of the moon, or the burning question of the will of D. After all, if one sun can hide this much, what else is waiting in the dark? So if one sun can hide this much, what else is waiting in the dark? And what else is waiting in you? You stayed. Through Void Century theories, through Nika's laughter, through Fisher Tiger's tragedy and the Revolutionary's rising flag. That's not passive watching. That's you choosing to sit with a story until its light stops being background and starts feeling personal. In a way, committing to a feature-length breakdown like this is its own quiet loyalty to the story's sun. Picture this. You, screen dimmed, room dark, listening to panels and episodes you've already seen get peeled apart like old poneglyph stone. Not for homework, not for trivia, but because some part of you wants to understand why that little circle in the sky keeps showing up whenever justice, freedom, and rebellion collide. That's a different kind of strength, isn't it? If you carry only one line out of this whole journey, let it be this. In One Piece, the sun isn't just background art, it's the story's promise that no night, no matter how long, is permanent. Not the night of slavery on Fishman Island, but the dawn Fisher Tiger carved into branded skin. Not the night of the world government's censorship, but the dawn hidden inside the Kozuki Crest once the snakes fall away. Not the night of Joy Boy's failure, but the dawn echoing in Luffy's Gear 5 grin. Let us take a look at this what-if scenario, not as an alternate timeline where the sun belongs to one chosen hero, but as a challenge. Every time you open a chapter, start an anime, or even scroll past a headline, ask yourself, who's claiming to own the light here? Who stands tall like a marine admiral, declaring absolute justice under a blazing sky, and who's left underground, waiting for their first sunrise? What happens when you start spotting suns the way Oda hides them, on flags, on tattoos, in throwaway background shots? You begin to see which crews are truly chasing freedom, and which systems are just building prettier cages. You notice when a story tells you this is the only way the world can be, and you feel that quiet, stubborn part of you answer, until the dawn comes. So if this adventure through symbols and shadows lit something up for you, Keep that ember close. Like, subscribe and share this video if you want to be on deck the next time a symbolic sunrise hits this channel. Whether we're dissecting the pull of the moon, the language of the sea, or the buried heartbeat of the will of D. This has been Anime Autopsy. See you at the next dawn.